Chapter 524. Without saying a word, he put the bracelet on his wrist and immediately closed his eyes. The red and black crystal beads in his dantian were originally revolving around his nascent soul, but for some reason, they were now motionless. The true essence in his dantian was also revolving at a uniform speed with the two beads, like an ancient nebula that had lost its momentum, immediately surging around his dantian. What was going on? Yu Qianqiu didn't know what to do in the face of this abnormal phenomenon. The situation in his dantian was different from others, and he didn't even have anyone to ask for advice. The only thing he could do now was to stay put and not forcibly interfere with it, so he decided to wait and see. Suddenly, he seemed to see the nascent soul in his body move, and his attention immediately focused on the nascent soul. He saw the nascent soul's pink little face was red, and its little head was raised and lowered, repeatedly, and even its little arms and legs were kicking a few times. Looking at the situation, it seemed that something was blocking its breathing. Yu Qianqiu was a little panicked. Could it be that the poison of the colorful fog had taken effect? Damn it! If the nascent soul was poisoned to death, wouldn't my cultivation be crippled? Just when he didn't know what to do, the nascent soul suddenly raised its head, opened its mouth, and sneezed. Pooh! A white light was spat out. Then the nascent soul comfortably took a few breaths, and gradually calmed down. Yu Qianqiu was a little relieved, as long as the nascent soul was fine. His attention turned to the white light flying around his dantian. He didn't know what it was, but it actually blocked the nascent soul's breathing. At this moment, as the nascent soul returned to normal, the two red and black beads that stopped at the nascent soul's waist gradually began to rotate again, yin and yang moved, and the qi was born. The scattered true essence in his dantian gradually followed the rotation, and the chaos slowly returned to order. The speed of the white light flying around his dantian was limited by the rotating true essence, and Yu Qianqiu finally saw its original appearance. It turned out to be a white crystal bead, and it looked the same as the red and black beads, only the color was different. Yu Qianqiu immediately understood that it was a crystal formed when the nascent soul absorbed the metal element. But what was up with this guy? Little Red and Little Black had been so obedient since they were born, obediently drawing circles around their nascent soul, but it had to be a little naughty. As expected of Xiaobai, there might be something wrong with her brain. However, no matter how naughty Little White was, it could not resist the general trend. The centripetal force generated by the revolving true essence gradually drew it to the nascent soul's side. It bumped into Little Red without thinking, and Little Red instantly glowed with a red light. Little White seemed to be frightened. Not long after it dodged, it was pulled back by the centripetal force, so it bumped into Little Black again. Little Black also glowed with a black light, as if warning it. Little White retreated again, but it couldn't escape the centripetal force. Left with no choice, it gently inserted itself between Little Red and Little Black and emitted a weak white light, as if saying, "I'm also round, I can also emit light, give me a spot." After the red and black beads saw that the white bead also emitted light, the red and black lights of the two beads became even brighter. As they rotated, they leaned against each other and finally gave up a spot for Little White. The distance between the three beads suddenly became equal, forming a tripod, and they rotated around the waist of the nascent soul. Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue in wonder. These three beads seemed to have a spirit of their own. Just when he breathed a sigh of relief and thought that it was over, the light of the three beads became brighter and brighter. The light of the three beads became brighter and brighter. The red, black, and white lights shone on each other, enveloping the nascent soul that was sitting cross-legged. At the same time, the three beads rotated faster and faster, as if they were a little too excited to have a new friend join them. These three guys were too naughty. Yu Qianqiu just smiled knowingly, but he immediately couldn't smile. It seemed that there was a problem. These three guys were a little too naughty. The true essence in his body was stirred into a tornado, gradually sucking in the three pearls. In the end, all of the true essence in his dantian was gathered between the three pearls, compressing the true essence to an incomparably thick and solid state. The nascent soul had been wrapped by the true essence, and he couldn't see its true appearance, so he didn't know what happened to the nascent soul. Damn! What the hell were these three bastards doing? Yu Qianqiu, who had his eyes closed, was sweating from the pain on his forehead. As the three beads rotated faster and faster, there was nothing in his dantian for them to sweep over. As a result, the entire dantian was slowly shrinking. Damn! Yu Qianqiu immediately grabbed 2 large handfuls of high-grade spirit stones from a few iron boxes in his bracelet, and channeled the spiritual energy in dozens of spirit stones directly into his dantian. However, the spiritual energy was not enough to fill the gaps between the 3 beads, and they were swept in the blink of an eye. Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything. Now the first thing to do was to fill up his dantian, otherwise he would die of pain. This was internal strife. Handfuls of high-grade spirit stones were taken out, but unfortunately, it was still not enough for the 3 guys. 2 handfuls of purple top-grade spirit stones were taken out, and the majestic spiritual energy surged from the meridians to his dantian. A burst of coolness echoed in his dantian, and Yu Qianqiu felt so comfortable that he let out a moan. However, after a short moment of comfort, the spiritual qi of the 2 best-grade spirit stones in his hands was sucked dry, but the 3 guys were still there, like a whirlwind sweeping away the clouds, and in the blink of an eye, the bulging spiritual qi was gone. Yu Qianqiu was a little flustered, and he grabbed 2 handfuls of top-grade spirit stones in his hands and sucked them crazily. He wanted to drown the 3 guys with spiritual energy. But the 3 beads still did what they wanted. Who was afraid of who? Thus, the 2 sides began to compete. Yu Qianqiu used all his strength to fill his dantian with spiritual energy, and the 3 beads coldly accepted everything that came their way. The sky gradually brightened. Outside the fog forest, the cultivators from various countries all looked embarrassed. Yu Qianqiu actually played them. He said that he would break out from here at night, and everyone had made thorough preparations, but in the end, there was no movement from that guy at all. Everyone looked at each other, and they all had the same thought in their hearts. How could they believe the enemy's words? Maybe Yu Qianqiu had already escaped somewhere else, and they were still waiting here. Were they stupid? Thus, the cultivators from various countries all sent messages back, and sent out the news that Yu Qianqiu might have escaped, and asked for close attention. And they would continue to stay here to search, to prevent Yu Qianqiu from escaping. After all, they didn't know what the situation was in other parts of the fog forest. If it was difficult to escape from other parts, then it would be meaningless for them to stay here. Of course, they wouldn't just wait here, sending out a large number of people to search around the fog forest. At this point, Yu Qianqiu had no idea how much time had passed. In short, close to 10,000 top-grade spirit stones had been completely absorbed by him. That was close to 100 million high-grade spirit stones. However, the 3 beads were still moving around. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth, grabbing a piece of divine-grade spirit stones from the dozen remaining in the box. The amount of spirit energy contained in these 2 shiny black spirit stones was immeasurable. With a slight inhalation, the majestic spirit energy rushed into Yu Qianqiu's meridians. It swelled so much that Yu Qianqiu almost threw them away. Enduring the excruciating pain from the spiritual energy rushing through his meridians, he slowly suppressed the absorption speed, pouring the spiritual energy into his dantian. That kind of pleasant feeling that made one's soul float in the clouds filled his entire body. Yu Qianqiu held the 2 spirit stones in his hand, moaning in comfort. The 2 black divine-grade spirit stones slowly changed color. After a long time, the black gradually turned into purple, and then the purple slowly faded, turning into an amber golden color, all the way until it was transparent, and finally a deathly gray. When the spiritual energy inside the 2 divine-grade spirit stones was completely absorbed, the 3 beads' rotation speed also slowed down, stopping completely in the end. The dazzling tricolored light gradually dimmed. It seemed like they were tired of playing, or were waiting for something. The mixed true essence began to slowly disperse, and the nascent soul wrapped in it gradually revealed its original appearance. What surprised Yu Qianqiu was that the chubby baby had lost all of its baby fat, turning into an innocent little boy, although it was still the same size as before. While Yu Qianqiu was looking at the baby in shock, the baby sitting cross-legged suddenly stretched his limbs, yawning loudly. His closed eyes slowly opened, looking around curiously. When he saw Yu Qianqiu's strand of divine sense staring at him, the baby also widened his eyes, looking at Yu Qianqiu. Ah! He can see my divine sense. Yu Qianqiu felt that the baby was looking into his eyes, so he tried to move his divine sense to the side of the baby, but the little boy also turned his head to look at him. As it turned out, this little boy really could see his divine sense. The two of them stared at each other for a long time. The little boy seemed to be a little tired, covering his mouth and yawning again. Then he sat cross-legged and took a deep breath. A strand of white true essence mixed with spiritual energy was sucked in by the little boy, and when he exhaled, it had already turned into a strand of pure white true essence. Just like this, he repeated the cycle of inhaling and exhaling. As he began to breathe again, the red, black, and white beads began to rotate at a faster speed. When it reached a certain speed, it began to rotate at a constant speed. Everything returned to normal. Yu Qianqiu waited for a while, and after confirming that there was no mistake, he opened his eyes. Looking up at the sky, he thought to himself, "It's already morning, those people outside must be very unhappy that they were stood up." What he didn't know was that he had been here for 3 days. Looking down at the golden altar, which was full of spirit stones that had exhausted their spiritual energy, he silently recalled the process of absorbing spiritual energy, and was shocked by the result. Not counting the top-grade spirit stones, tens of thousands of top-grade spirit stones were equivalent to 100 million top-grade spirit stones, and the 2 divine-grade spirit stones were equivalent to 200 million top-grade spirit stones. In other words, he had absorbed more than 300 million top-grade spirit stones in one go. Oh my God! The nascent soul in my body consumed 300 million top-grade spirit stones in one go. There's no benefit at all, just to stare at each other, and then what should I do? Yu Qianqiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He touched his forehead, shook his head, and was slightly stunned. The nascent soul opened its eyes and stretched. According to Nongzhu, this was the phenomenon of breaking through to the crossing calamity stage. Chapter 525. He was pleasantly surprised. His divine sense quickly returned to his dantian to check. The nascent soul was still sitting cross-legged in his dantian, quietly refining and condensing the true essence. It was still the same nascent soul, but it had grown from a fat baby to a little boy. There was a white pearl at his waist. This was the change in his dantian. Looking at the condensed true essence that was as flexible as steel, Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes in excitement and rubbed his hands anxiously. How is this possible? How is this possible? He jumped from mid-stage nascent soul to early-stage tribulation passing. With a wave of his hand, he swept the dried spirit stones on the altar into utopia and calmed his excited emotions. Then, he took out an ordinary flying sword and threw it into the air. Then, he circulated his qi, driving the true essence in his body, and his shield of vigor quickly surged out. It was obviously different from the nascent soul protective aura. It was much more transparent and stable. With the point of his finger, the flying sword whistled toward him. With a clang, the flying sword was deflected, and the protective aura was unscathed. He then retracted the protective aura with a face full of surprise. The flying sword flew back with a swoosh and entered his storage bag. Then, he closed his eyes and opened his arms. Between his sleeves, one side was constantly glowing with green light, while the other side was flashing with black light. Green and black flying swords continuously surged out. After the total number of flying swords exceeded 1,000, they were still emerging. When the number reached nearly 3,000, he opened his eyes and exhaled. He looked at the green and black flying swords around him in surprise. Guiyuan's sword technique, sword control. Yu Qianqiu shouted and moved his fingers like a swimming dragon. Suddenly, the 3,002 colored flying swords danced in the sky in the basin, sometimes like a swarm of bees, sometimes like a flying dragon. The swords moved according to his will. It was a spectacular scene. It seems that controlling 3,000 flying swords is still a little difficult. I can only control 2,000 at the same time with ease. Yu Qianqiu muttered to himself. He took a deep breath and flicked his sleeves. His whole body soared into the sky and quickly floated in midair. Activating the sword art, the 3,000 flying swords created all sorts of obstacles in the air. Yu Qianqiu's figure flashed, rapidly changing his figure among the obstacles, quickly shuttling back and forth, experiencing the pleasure of flying in the air after getting rid of the flying swords. In the past, when he was flying, he could only adopt a standing or squatting position at all times. This was sometimes a very disadvantageous thing in a complicated situation. But now, he could change his posture and fly in the air as much as he wanted. Howl. He let out a long howl in midair, and his body quickly flashed out of the sword net barrier, flying in circles in the huge basin space. The 3,000 flying swords followed closely behind him. Yu Qianqiu looked back and smiled. With a thought in his mind, the 3,000 flying swords lit up with either green or black flames at the same time. The green and black lights intertwined, creating a lonely but unique radiance. That scene was simply breathtaking. He was like a phoenix that had just been reborn from the ashes, dragging a huge and gorgeous tail flame behind him as he soared in the sky. It was a very beautiful scene, but he was the only one admiring himself, stroking his hair coquettishly, dancing alone. Experiencing the more powerful energy in his body than ever before, it was enough to support him to fly in the air. That feeling was wonderful, and very satisfying. Yu Qianqiu dragged the tail flame behind him as he swooped down from the sky. When he was close to the ground, he quickly flew up in an arc, opened his arms, and leisurely hovered in the air. The gorgeous tail flame quietly bloomed under his feet, elegant and calm. After playing for a while, he stopped in the air, rubbed his face with both hands, and let out a long sigh. He shook his head and smiled reservedly, as if he was lamenting that he also had this day. Guiyuan sword art, sword control. Withdraw. Yu Qianqiu shouted in the air, and clapped his hands together. The 3,000 flying swords drew 3,000 magnificent lines of fire in all directions, and then swarmed towards him in the air. Yu Qianqiu clasped his hands together and stood still. Swoosh, swoosh. The flying swords shot into his body one by one, and then disappeared. When the last sword also disappeared, this beautiful performance finally ended. His figure flashed, and he once again landed on the golden altar. After venting for a while, he could be considered to have calmed down. Now, he was certain that his cultivation had indeed reached the early stage of tribulation passing, but how did this happen? Although he wasn't completely sure about one thing, he was sure that it had something to do with his understanding of the golden incantation. After thinking for a while, he remembered the various things in the past. He remembered that when he first practiced the fire incantation, although his cultivation had increased, there wasn't much change. If there was any change, it would be when he practiced the water incantation. Once he mastered the water incantation, he immediately broke through from the core formation stage to the nascent soul stage, and then his nascent soul spat out a red and black bead. At that time, he didn't pay much attention to it, and thought that it was the result of his rapid cultivation progress. Now that he thought about it, his cultivation speed was indeed too fast. This time, he just happened to practice the golden incantation, and his cultivation immediately broke through from the middle stage of nascent soul stage to the early stage of tribulation passing. Could these two breakthroughs be related? Once he mastered the water incantation, he broke through from the core formation stage to the nascent soul stage. Once he mastered the gold incantation, he broke through from the nascent soul stage to the tribulation passing. Then, if he comprehended the wood incantation or the earth incantation the next time, would he? Yu Qianqiu's body trembled, and his eyes flickered. He didn't dare to think any further. According to his speculation, if he comprehended the wood incantation or the earth incantation again, wouldn't he directly break through from the tribulation passing to the soul formation stage? If he comprehended all 5 incantations, and his speculation was correct, he would enter another stage from the soul formation stage. Yu Qianqiu subconsciously looked back at the golden horn hanging on the golden chain. He thought to himself, perhaps at that time, he would be qualified to blow it again. Then, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. He still didn't know what was going on with these 5 incantations, and he didn't know when he would have the opportunity to comprehend the next incantation. He couldn't force it, and he was indeed thinking too far ahead. He didn't know that he had already stayed inside for 3 days, but the entire cultivation world outside had already been turned upside down because of him. Yu Qianqiu had single-handedly slaughtered more than 2,000 cultivators from various countries. This was simply too shocking. All the soul formation stage cultivators from various countries were furious. They immediately ordered their disciples to kill Yu Qianqiu, regardless of whether he was dead or alive. This time, Yu Qianqiu had ruthlessly slapped the faces of those soul formation stage cultivators who sent their subordinates to steal the treasures. This slap was incomparably resounding, and it shocked the entire cultivation world. But without a doubt, it also brought him a lot of trouble. The promise that the soul formation stage cultivators wouldn't interfere was broken. The first to break this promise was the lord of the Jinshan country, the soul formation mid-stage cultivator, Pu Taidong. The death of 5 disciples at the end of the tribulation passing stage made him furious. After receiving the news, he immediately rushed to the fog forest. However, with his cultivation, he didn't dare to trespass into the fog forest. This surprised his disciples. Third brother Axayan, who was present, understood that the fog forest was extremely vicious. His master was proficient in medicine and had personally come here before. After testing the poison, he still didn't dare to enter. As for him telling Yu Qianqiu that his master had entered before, it was just to flatter his master. For countless years, no one had ever heard of anyone who entered the fog forest being able to die a good death. It was precisely because it was never accessible that it became a forgotten corner of the world. Pu Taidong personally came to inspect the forest a few times, but he still couldn't find Yu Qianqiu. But this wasn't important. What was important was that he used his actions to tell the entire cultivation world that he had personally made a move. He would no longer abide by that stupid rule. As for his actions, the other soul formation stage cultivators didn't say anything. 5 disciples at the end of the tribulation passing stage had died. No one would let Yu Qianqiu off easily. What's more, since Yu Qianqiu was so powerful, they found a reason to personally make a move. In addition to this matter, there was another news that caused an uproar in the cultivation world. It was that the world's second expert, Wen Lanfeng, had come out of seclusion. The one who spread this news was naturally Hua Zhongming, who was the first to know. Subsequently, under everyone's careful attention, everyone learned from some channels that Wen Lanfeng immediately went to the demon domain after coming out of seclusion. This news immediately aroused everyone's interest. It even overshadowed the limelight of Yu Qianqiu's massacre of 2,000 cultivators. As for why he went to the demon domain, although no one dared to go there to inquire about the news, everyone was undoubtedly clear about it. What else could the world's second expert do other than challenge the world's first expert, by Changchun, to a duel? Drinking tea and chatting was impossible. almost all the soul formation stage experts were anxiously and uneasily waiting for the news. There were many reasons. Bai Changchun's skills shocked the world in the battle in the East Sea. That level of cultivation made everyone feel that they could never surpass it in their lifetime. When Lan Feng could confidently go to the demon domain to find Bai Changchun, indicating that his cultivation had reached an incredible level after 100 years of seclusion. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to find Bai Changchun. Bai Changchun alone was enough to give everyone a headache. Now that there was a similar one Lan Feng, everyone felt very bad. But everyone still hoped that Lan Feng would be able to defeat Bai Changchun this time. Because those who had dealt with Lan Feng knew that he was much easier to talk to than Bai Changchun. That fellow Bai Changchun was simply a god of death, and he would start a massacre at the slightest disagreement, causing everyone to be anxious and tremble with fear. If Lan Feng was defeated again, there was no doubt that Bai Changchun would still be an insurmountable existence. In fact, everyone hoped that both of them would be seriously injured. It would be best if both of them were seriously injured. Then, everyone would join forces to get rid of the two in one fell swoop, completely removing the mountain that was pressing on them. Everyone would benefit together. A few days passed. Everyone waited anxiously, but there was no news. They did not know what the situation in the demon domain was like, but no one dared to go there to inquire about the news. Speaking of Lan Feng, he was standing by the lake of Shuntian Island with Nongzhu. The two of them looked at the sparkling lake in the distance and enjoyed it side by side. Nongzhu tilted her head slightly and said, "You are going back. My injuries have healed. Why do I still stay here? Of course, I have to go back." When Lan Feng sighed and said, "The world's #1 expert is the world's #1 expert. My cultivation has reached this level, but I still lost to him. I know that I can never surpass him in this life. This is unfathomable. I just don't understand how he can stay in the human world with such a cultivation. It stands to reason that he should have ascended to the immortal world long ago." "Oh." Nongzhu looked back at him and asked solemnly, "Then what level do you think his cultivation has reached? You are close friends with him. Don't you know better than me?" When Lan Feng asked. Not far away, the laughter of two women could be heard. Nongzhu looked back and saw Zi and Furong talking and laughing. They were probably talking about something about Yu Qianqiu. This was the topic of conversation between the two women every day. After looking, she said slowly, "I don't know, so I asked you." When Lan Feng shook his head with a wry smile and said, "To tell you the truth. With my current cultivation, I will be able to integrate the 7 spirits hero into my life's soul in less than 100 years and then ascend to the immortal world. Because of this, I have the confidence to fight Bai Changchun. However, even if my cultivation has reached this level, Bai Changchun can kill me with just a few moves. Can you imagine how high his cultivation is now? It's incredible. You are about to integrate the 7 spirits hero." Nongzhu was shocked. "What do you think?" When Lan Feng smiled bitterly. Nongzhu knew that Bai Changchun's cultivation was high, but compared with Lan Feng, she knew how scary it was. She swallowed hard and said, "Old Bai. Does he want to be lazy in the human world for the rest of his life? He has become a land immortal. Isn't he just trying to scare me?" They looked at each other and shook their heads speechlessly. When Lan Feng patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, "I still have to thank you this time. You saved my life again, so I owe you 2 lives. How can I repay you? This time you broke into the demon ghost region. Old Bai has made up his mind to kill you. I didn't save you. You should thank Old Bai's precious disciple. You should have heard it." Nongzhu shrugged. What kind of person is this Yu Qianqiu? How could he be accepted as an official disciple by Bai Changchun? When Lan Feng asked curiously. "What kind of person?" Hee hee. You won't believe it. It's not wrong to call him a despicable person. Alas. Anyway, he is very bold. You can ask around when you have time. He is completely different from his master. The master is arrogant, but the disciple is wicked. Nongju said, do you know what Bai Changchun said? He said that Yu Qianzhou's future achievements will not be lower than his. When Lanfeng was shocked, Bai Changchun has a unique vision. Since he can make such an evaluation, it must be true. I really want to meet him. Nongju turned around and faced him. She frowned and said, Brother Wen, I hope you can take care of this boy. If something happens to him, many people in the cultivation world will die. I have no doubt that Old Bai can massacre the whole world of cultivation. You should know Old Bai's character. He never shows mercy when he needs to. Wen Lanfeng nodded slightly. At this moment, there was a sudden fluctuation in front of the big house in the center of the island. Nongju turned her head and said, it's the message formation of old Nanming. I wonder what news came from Xian Island. Let's go and have a look. Chapter 526. When Lanfeng smiled faintly and watched as ancestor Nanming flashed to the big house. During this period of recuperation, ancestor Nanming and Nongju had quarreled countless times because of this communication formation. Although they quarreled, Nongju could still do whatever she wanted to do. As soon as he teleported over, he saw Nongju jump into the communication formation. From afar, ancestor Nanming shouted angrily, Old Nongju, how dare you! Bai Changchun and ancestor Nanming arrived at the same time. The former frowned while the latter rushed into the transmission formation and stared at Nongju. Nongju snorted coldly, my kindness is really unrewarded. I wanted to do it for you when you weren't here, but I had to look at your face. Humph. She slowly walked out with her hands behind her back. I've never seen anyone as thick-skinned as you. Ancestor Nanming mocked. He did not say much and decided to contact Xian Island first. On the other side, Zi and Hibiscus glanced over at them. After that, they went back to talking about themselves. They were already used to this kind of scene. There was nothing to worry about. After a while, ancestor Nanming walked out of the communication formation and looked at Bai Changchun with a hesitant look. Nongju, who tilted her head, walked back as if nothing had happened. She coughed and said, what's the trouble? Why don't you tell us? Is it related to me? Bai Changchun looked at him and more or less guessed something. Ancestor Nanming nodded and said, Bai Changchun, your disciple Yu Qianzhou might be in trouble. When Lanfeng and Nongju looked at each other and stared at ancestor Nanming at the same time. Bai Changchun opened his eyes slightly and said, speak your mind. Grandmaster Nanming was silent for a while, then he slowly repeated the news that came from Xian Island. He told him about how the various countries hunted Yu Qianzhou for his treasured blade, how Yu Qianzhou slaughtered nearly 2,000 cultivators from the various countries outside the Misty Forest, and how he hid in the Misty Forest in the end. In fact, Xian Island had also spread the news that Wen Lanfeng had come to the demon domain to challenge Bai Changchun to a duel. However, ancestor Nanming had witnessed the whole thing and knew that everything was fine now. Naturally, there was no need to mention this unpleasant matter. After old ancestor Nanming finished speaking, the entire place was silent. Bai Changchun's cold gaze flickered continuously. After Nongju came back to her senses, she cried out involuntarily, Nanming, did you hear it wrong? You're saying that Yu Qianzhou single-handedly massacred nearly 2,000 cultivators from various countries? Also, Yu Qianzhou could actually come and go as he pleased in the Misty Forest. How is this possible? It shouldn't be wrong. My disciples said that this matter has already spread like wildfire in the cultivation world. At that time, there were thousands of people who witnessed it. Grandmaster Nanming looked at Bai Changchun and said, among these 2,000 cultivators, the lowest cultivation level is at the nascent soul realm. Pu Taidong even had 5 disciples at the end of the tribulation passing stage, and they died under Yu Qinchou's flying sword. Is this kid crazy? Nongzhu asked in a daze. Wen Lanfeng was also shocked. In his life, he had never killed so many people at once. He glanced at Bai Changchun. Like master, like disciple. They're both cruel and merciless. Grandmaster Nanming said in a low voice, Pu Taidong has personally come out because of the death of his 5 disciples at the end of the tribulation passing stage. The soul-forming realm cultivators of various countries are also restless, Pu Taidong. What a great ability. Bai Changchun said softly. His voice was not loud, but the coldness in his words sent a chill down the 3 spines. The 3 of them looked at each other. If Pu Taidong knew that he had provoked Bai Changchun's disciple, how would he feel? As expected, Bai Changchun said with a cold gaze, more than 5,000 cultivators are after my disciple. Pu Taidong's disciple is a human, but is my disciple not a human? It seems that the Lord of Jinshan Kingdom has to be changed. He looked back at Grandmaster Nanming and said, Nanming, I'll leave the matters here to you for the time being. I'll go to other countries and see how many heads Pu Taidong has grown. The few of them were shocked when they heard this. Was he going to start a massacre? Grandmaster Nanming stammered, then, this. Nongzhu frowned and immediately sent a voice transmission to Wen Lanfeng, Brother Wen, once this crazy old man goes out, the cultivation world will definitely collapse. Just do as we agreed, please. Bai Changchun. Wen Lanfeng took a step forward and said with a smile, thank you for showing mercy. You should focus on your own business with Nanming first. You don't need to do it yourself. It's making a mountain out of a molehill if you do it. Although I, Wen Lanfeng, am no match for you, I'm confident that I still have some influence in the cultivation world. I'm about to say goodbye to you. I'll go back and take care of your disciple. You? Bai Changchun was startled. Although Wen Lanfeng was no match for him, with his cultivation, he would probably have few opponents in the cultivation world. It shouldn't be difficult for him to go out and help them. That's right. Why didn't I think of that? Nongzhu appeared to be suddenly enlightened. She walked over and patted Wen Lanfeng's shoulder, saying, Old Wen, you're right. Sending old Bai out personally is making a mountain out of a molehill. It's best if you go out and warn those soul formation cultivators. Haha. Right. Grandmaster Nanming struck while the iron was hot, saying, Bai Changchun, let's leave this matter to Wen Lanfeng. The arrays in Twilight Valley are too complicated. I've almost gotten dizzy several times. I'll have to trouble you to stay and lead the way for me. These words were a little fake. Given Grandmaster Nanming's artificing skills, he had probably memorized the arrays by heart after being led around so many times. It should be known that the more skilled a person was at artificing, the higher their attainments in arrays. Otherwise, he would not have become the world's #1 artificer. Nongzhu immediately shot him a disdainful look. Wasn't this more of a hindrance than a help? The Grandmaster Nanming also realized that he had gone too far and subconsciously shrank back. Bai Changchun was no fool. He glanced at them and understood what they were thinking. He slowly said to Wen Lanfeng, then I'll have to trouble you. These words immediately made the 3 sigh in relief. Wen Lanfeng's melancholy eyes revealed a hint of a smile, and he cupped his hands, saying, goodbye. With that, he disappeared and reappeared in the air, a shadow rapidly tearing through the air. Countless soul formation cultivators had been waiting for him on the road from the demon realm to the Baiwan kingdom. There was no way around it. No one dared to trespass the demon realm, so they could only wait outside. Moreover, this was a place Wen Lanfeng had to pass on his way back to the Baiwan kingdom. Of course, the premise was that Wen Lanfeng could return alive. Wen Lanfeng flew across the sky, not knowing that so many people were waiting for him below. With his extremely high cultivation, even a master at the final stage of the crossing calamity stage would not be able to see him with the naked eye. His flying speed was so fast that it was almost silent. With a faint whooshing sound, the people squatting below immediately pricked up their ears. The people below almost couldn't see Wen Lanfeng's figure when they looked up. However, they could tell that the sound was coming from the Baiwan Kingdom. Judging from the shocking speed of the sound, they were basically sure that it was Wen Lanfeng. In particular, there were several practitioners at the early stage of the soul formation realm on the way. They saw the almost indistinct shadow and recognized that it was Wen Lanfeng from the figure. Compared with the others, they were even more shocked. They didn't expect that Wen Lanfeng's cultivation had reached such a high level after 100 years of seclusion. No wonder he dared to challenge Bai Changchun. To everyone's surprise, Wen Lanfeng came back safe and sound. Could it be that Bai Changchun had been defeated by him? This news was so important that everyone spread the news as fast as they could. For a moment, the soul formation realm in the cultivation world was boiling again. Bai Changchun was very likely defeated by Wen Lanfeng. On the top of a snowy mountain in the Dirong Empire, Bing Qingzi, who was at the final stage of the soul formation realm, suddenly opened his eyes and stood up. He looked in the direction of the Baiwan Kingdom in a daze, his white robe fluttering in the wind. In the cloud palace of the heavenly peak in the East Nation, Hu Changshou, who was at the final stage of the soul formation realm, flashed out of the palace and looked in the direction of the Baiwan Kingdom through the sea of clouds. In the Tuan Kingdom, the headquarters of the World Chamber of Commerce, the Cornucopia, God of Wealth Peak. Yin Baikong was also looking in the direction of the Baiwan Kingdom. He stroked the trunk of a pine tree and said in a muffled voice, "Wen Lanfeng defeated by Changchun. Unbelievable. Sikong, you've seen Bai Changchun's skills in the East Sea. Do you think this news is reliable?" Behind him stood a skinny man with white hair. He was his eldest disciple, the early stage of the soul formation realm, Sikong Ju. The gloomy Sikong Ju replied, "It's hard to say. I don't believe that there's always the number one in the world. Besides, Wen Lanfeng has really returned. There's no doubt about it." "You mean, Wen Lanfeng might really defeat Bai Changchun?" Yin Baikong turned around and asked. "Not necessarily." Sikong Ju frowned and said, "There's something that I can't figure out. It said that Wen Lanfeng went to the demon domain more than 10 days ago. Is his battle with Bai Changchun going to last more than 10 days? "Yes." Yin Baikong looked in the direction of the Baiwan Kingdom again and sighed, "We'll understand everything after we go to the demon domain. However, the final news is not confirmed yet. If we suddenly go there, I'm afraid we'll get ourselves into trouble. Since Wen Lanfeng can return from the demon domain alive, it's worth it for us to make a great effort to befriend him no matter if he wins or loses. Sikong, prepare a gift for me. I'm going to Baiwan Kingdom to congratulate Wen Lanfeng for coming out of seclusion. By the way, I want a big gift." "Understood. I'll do it now." Sikong Ju bowed and left. The top 10 experts of the cultivation world were all late-stage soul formation experts. Unfortunately, 2 of them were killed by Bai Changchun in the Battle of the East Sea. In other words, there were only 8 late-stage soul formation experts left in the entire cultivation world. Among the 8, apart from Bai Changchun, Wen Lanfeng, Yin Baikong, Bing Qingzi, and Hu Changshou, the remaining 3 were also staring in the direction of the Baiwan Kingdom. They all felt that it was time to make a trip there. There were also lords of the mid-stage soul formation experts who came to the Baiwan Kingdom one after another. All of them brought gifts of great value. It should be known that if Wen Lanfeng really defeated Bai Changchun, he would be the true number 1 expert in the world. Even if he didn't defeat Bai Changchun, Wen Lanfeng's cultivation was worth befriending. Moreover, everyone wanted to inquire about the news. Chapter 527. The people who paid the most attention to Wen Lanfeng were naturally the people of the Wen family. Wen Rui had already sent people to wait outside the Fey Ghost domain while he stayed in the Wen family to make arrangements. What arrangements? Naturally, it was to prepare for the Wen family's retreat after Wen Lanfeng was killed by Bai Changchun. It was related to the rise and fall of a big family, so early preparations had to be made. Bai Wan country's holy land, the Holy Temple. Wen Rui stood quietly in the center of the hall, spending more than 10 days in anxiety and uneasiness. The disciples sent to wait outside the Fey Ghost domain sent news that the old ancestor had safely returned from the Fey Ghost domain and was heading to Bai Wan country. Ah! Wen Rui raised his head and roared, shaking the furnishings in the hall and causing them to fall to the ground. The anxiety and uneasiness that had accumulated over the past few days poured out. This news was not told to anyone because the old ancestor did not like to be ostentatious. A figure flashed and appeared in the sky above the Holy Land alone, waiting for the old ancestor's return with an excited face. Wen Rui was even more excited when a figure rapidly approached from the distance. The old ancestor's cultivation had indeed improved greatly. Then, his vision blurred and a tall figure in a gray and white robe appeared in front of him. The gray and white robe fluttered in the wind. Wen Lanfeng smiled faintly and said, "Wen Rui, you've worked hard all these years." This sentence made Wen Rui's nose turn sour. He bowed deeply and said, "Welcome, old ancestor. Let's go back and talk." Wen Lanfeng had disappeared, but his voice still floated here. Wen Rui turned and returned. The holy temple of Bai Wan country was hidden in the mountains and rivers. It was a palace made of white jade, white and warm, elegant and extraordinary. Wen Lanfeng walked in slowly. At this time, the holy temple was covered with things that had been tidied up. It was still clean and tidy. Because the jade was transparent and the dome was made of thin jade, the entire temple was filled with a hazy white light. That holy aura made everyone's heart feel holy and clear. Wen Lanfeng quietly walked to the central seat slightly higher than the entire hall and sat down. Under the holy white light, he looked at Wen Rui and smiled, "Were you waiting for me outside?" Although their cultivation was only 2 levels apart, Wen Rui was considered Wen Lanfeng's great-grandson. They were family. Wen Lanfeng had always been amiable, so Wen Rui was not nervous. He said frankly, "I heard that the old ancestor has returned from the Fey Ghost domain. Of course, I have to welcome you. Let me ask you about someone." "I don't know if you know him," Wen Lanfeng said. Wen Lanfeng said, "Who?" Wen Rui had originally wanted to ask the old ancestor about the battle situation with Bai Changchun, but since the old ancestor had asked, he naturally had to reply first. "Yu Qianqiu." Wen Lanfeng asked, "Have you heard of this person?" "Yu Qianqiu." Wen Rui was stunned. Although he didn't understand why the great ancestor would mention Yu Qianqiu, he still told him everything he knew. "Not only do we know each other, but we even dated for a period of time. The cause of the matter was Mr. Nongzhu." This Yu Qianqiu pretended to be Mr. Nongzhu and got into a fight with the Wen family. He told how the Wen clan got acquainted with Yu Qianqiu, and how Yu Qianqiu fought with the cultivators of the various nations during the Deyang Kingdom's Prince Consort Selection martial arts competition, and how Yu Qianqiu's subordinates profaned the princess of Deyang Kingdom. In order to protect his subordinates, he killed Hu Zhongming's disciple, and then escaped from Deyang city. These were all the information that Wen Bai sent back. Impersonating Nongzhu. Wen Lanfeng was stunned for a moment, but then he felt relieved. The two of them knew each other, but after hearing Wen Rui's words, Yu Qianqiu was indeed as wicked as Nongzhu said. Could it be that he had to protect such a guy? He smiled bitterly and shook his head. "I heard that Yu Qianqiu has caused some trouble recently." "Yes." When Rui nodded and told him about Yu Qianzhou's massacre in the fog forest. After he finished, he sighed. This guy has an endless stream of strange skills. I didn't expect him to be able to come and go freely in the fog forest. I heard from Nongzhu that he has a powerful background, but I don't know the specifics. His background is indeed powerful. Nongzhu's words are correct. Wen Lanfeng sighed. What is his background? Elder ancestor, can you tell me? Wen Rui asked curiously. Don't tell anyone else. Wen Lanfeng sighed. Yu Qianzhou is Bai Changchun's disciple. What? Wen Rui was surprised. I had guessed it before, but I didn't expect him to be Bai Changchun's disciple. After thinking about it, he asked nervously, did the ancestor go to the demon domain to find Bai Changchun? Wen Lanfeng understood something from his twinkling eyes. He shook his head and sighed. I lost. I lost again to Bai Changchun, and it was even worse than 100 years ago. My life was hanging by a thread, and Nongzhu saved me again. Ha! Bai Changchun is an existence that I can never surpass. His tone was full of bitterness. Wen Rui was silent. Nongzhu had already told him that the ancestor was no match for Bai Changchun. He was someone who knew, so he was not surprised. At least the ancestor came back alive, which was a blessing in disguise. After a pause, he said, Ancestor, there are many people in the cultivation world who are concerned about this matter. Humph. A bunch of arrogant guys. Everyone knows what they are planning. If I had known, I would have let Bai Changchun do it himself. Wen Lanfeng sneered. But it's fine. It saves me a lot of trouble. I just need to wait for the guests. Wen Rui nodded and then added softly, Ancestor, not long after you left, Senior Lu of Spirit Fang Valley came to find you. Upon hearing this, Wen Lanfeng jumped to his feet and muttered to himself with an excited expression, She came to see me personally. She came to find me personally. After a few words of excitement, his expression became gloomy again. He shook his head and said, I'm afraid that she came to find me for no other reason. She must have heard the news and came to stop me from going to the demon domain to find Bai Changchun. Ha! I haven't fulfilled my promise to defeat Bai Changchun. How can I face you? I'm afraid I won't have the chance in this life. Why should I see you again? Wen Rui lowered his head helplessly. Ancestor. Just wake up. However, this was the ancestor's private matter. It was not his place to interrupt. Yu Qianzhou, who was in the mist forest, knew nothing about what was happening outside. After knowing that he had become an expert in the early stage of tribulation passing, he looked around happily. He stood on the golden altar and giggled unscrupulously. After all, he was the only one here. Before leaving, Yu Qianzhou suddenly raised his arms and shouted, Thank you, dense fog forest, thank you, 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 thank you. What do you mean? Is someone from the immortal world coming again? Yu Qianzhou put down his hands and looked around in shock at the colorful fog on the mountain peak. He guessed that another immortal was going to suffer. He took a few steps back and stood at the edge of the altar, leaving the center of the altar for the immortal world to descend to the mortal world. Yu Qianzhou crossed his arms and looked on coldly. He snorted and said, Life is short. Like the morning dew, there are not many people who can see the immortal world die. He looked very proud, thinking about what treasure the next immortal world would have. Outside the mist forest, the cultivators from the various countries had already dispersed. However, there were still some people hiding in the surrounding clouds. They were the people from the various countries who stayed behind to continue observing. They wanted to prevent Yu Qianzhou from running away. Even if they didn't catch him, they would at least follow him when they discovered him. However, these people suddenly realized that in the sky above the central area of the mist forest, there were dark clouds rolling, lightning flashing, and thunder rumbling. The dark clouds kept rolling, accumulating into a thick layer of clouds. Lightning dragons flickered in and out of the clouds, spitting out ferocious lightning bolts. Suddenly, an early-stage tribulation passing cultivator shouted, "It's the tribulation clouds." Someone beside him frowned and said, "Something is going through the tribulation clouds in the mist forest. I don't know if it's a human, a demon, or a ghost." The people hiding in the clouds came out one after another. One should know that the power contained in the tribulation clouds was huge. It was even more powerful than the people who were going through the tribulation clouds below. Once the surrounding clouds and mist were implicated, the people hiding inside wouldn't have a good time. Actually, there was something that Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding inside, and the cultivators hiding outside did not know. Previously, when the Immortal Ascension passage opened, although the sky was also covered by dark clouds, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled, the people outside the mist forest did not see or hear anything. On the contrary, the appearance of the tribulation clouds this time allowed everyone to see it. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on the golden altar with his arms crossed, gradually felt that something was wrong. The wind and clouds were turbulent, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. However, it did not condense into a black hole like last time. Instead, it seemed like a conspiracy was brewing in the sky. The strong wind swept through the basin. Yu Qianqiu was like a small boat in the raging waves. He wanted to leave, but in order to see what was happening behind him, he was forced to stay by the side and hugged a golden pillar to resist the strong wind. Damn it! I'll endure it for the sake of watching a good show. I hope you won't disappoint me. Yu Qianqiu hugged the pillar and shouted towards the sky. He thought that the commotion this time was even bigger than the previous time when the immortals descended to the mortal world. He reckoned that there would be a good show to watch, and perhaps the benefits would be greater. In the end, the heavens immediately gave him an answer. Boom! A loud sound shook the sky, and the basin was filled with echoes. A ferocious and meandering thick thunderbolt instantly smashed down with a bang, illuminating the entire basin clearly. The sound and the aura were shocking. Yu Qianqiu felt that it was blinding, and he squinted his eyes. However, before he could react, he felt as if he was struck by lightning, and his whole body went numb. He, who was hugging the golden pillar, was sent flying, and rolled to the center of the golden altar. His whole body was charred, and his clothes were ragged. The charred smoke from his body was blown away by the wind. He laid there, and his eyes rolled back, and he instantly fainted. The so-called tribulation clouds were the 9 stages of tribulation clouds in the sky. Each stage was stronger than the previous one. If one could withstand it, he would succeed. If not, there was no need to explain the consequences. In fact, the early stage of tribulation clouds was not very difficult for most cultivators to withstand. However, Yu Qianqiu did not even think about tribulation clouds, and was still waiting to watch the show. In the end, he was unprepared for the lightning's wrath, and it would be strange if he was not unlucky. This was retribution. The lightning flashed more frequently in the dark clouds, and the next wave of more powerful lightning strikes was coming. However, Yu Qianqiu really fainted. At this moment, a golden light suddenly appeared from his abdomen, and it was even more dazzling than the entire golden altar. It slowly wrapped around Yu Qianqiu. Chapter 528. The dark clouds in the sky darkened, and the wind surged. The lightning dragon stuck out its tongue and peeped at the golden light below. The situation seemed to be a confrontation. Suddenly, there was a thunderclap, and a lightning bolt as thick as a bucket drilled out of the dark clouds and went straight for the golden light in the center of the altar. The golden light that was wrapped around Yuqiancho also shone with thousands of golden rays in an instant, enveloping the entire platform of the altar. A green and white light, and a golden light, instantly collided with each other. Boom! The two forces collided, creating a loud sound in the air, and a powerful shock wave spread to the entire basin. The green and white lightning bolt was obviously weaker, and it was instantly destroyed by the brilliant golden light. Even the cultivators outside the fog forest heard the loud sound, and they looked at each other in shock, not knowing what was going on. At first, the first lightning bolt looked quite normal, like someone in the early stage of the tribulation passing. How did the second lightning bolt become so powerful in an instant? It was like a cultivator in the middle stage of the tribulation passing. Look! Someone cried out in surprise. In the sky above the center of the fog forest, the dark clouds gradually turned as black as ink, surging and surging. It was extremely terrifying, and countless lightning dragons were shuttling in the dark clouds. The scene was even worse than the tribulation passing at the end of the tribulation passing. Just as the thunder in the sky was brewing its power, the golden light in the basin seemed to be angry. The golden light shot up from the basin into the sky like countless giant golden thorns, shining and stirring the dark clouds. In the ink-like dark clouds, the lightning bolts became more intense, and they crazily revolved around the golden thorns. The monstrous wind and waves rushed in all directions, forcing people thousands of meters away to quickly retreat. Everyone looked at the scene in the distance, bewildered. In the dark clouds, a golden light pierced through the sky and rushed into the universe. The golden light shone in the universe, and then it immediately retracted, as if it was summoning something. In the vast universe, because of the appearance of this golden light, the nearby 12 stars instantly shone with silver splendor, and they quickly shot toward the coordinates exposed by the golden light. 12 rays of silver light broke through the atmosphere and shot toward the dark clouds that were entangled with the golden light. Every time the silver splendor rushed into the dark clouds, there would be an earth-shattering explosion in the sky. 12 consecutive earth-shattering explosions were deafening to the ears of those hiding 10,000 meters away. The dark clouds that filled the sky were instantly dispersed by the 12 silver splendors. The sporadic lightning also disappeared without a trace with 2 crackling sounds. The moment the dark clouds dispersed, the people in the distance could see the sky clearly. Tens of thousands of golden rays converged into a single line and returned to the fog forest. The 12 silver rays that came from the sky followed the direction where the golden rays had returned. On the altar in the basin, the golden light retracted back into Yuqiancho's abdomen. The concentrated silver light descended from the sky and covered his body. The silver light flashed for a while. After a while, the silver light shrunk back into the sky and split into 12 silver pillars again. At this point, everything returned to its original state. Oh my God! On the golden altar, Yuqiancho woke up with a groan. He got up and looked around, but he didn't find anything unusual. Was it a dream? Wasn't it a little too real? Yuqiancho turned around twice suspiciously. Suddenly, he realized that something was wrong with his body. He looked at himself and was instantly shocked. His entire body seemed to be swollen and was wrapped in a charred mass. Both his hands were like bare paws. He quickly peeled himself off, and the charred shell on his body started to crack and fall off piece by piece. Damn it! So I was really struck by lightning just now. Yuqiancho kept cursing. After peeling off the charred shell on his body, he immediately circulated the water art, and a water dragon wrapped around him to wash him. After cleaning up, he quickly took a set of clothes from Utopia and put them on. He searched the ground and realized that his storage bag had become a tattered cloth bag. Fortunately, it was just a decoration and didn't contain anything. On the other hand, the bracelet on his wrist was still intact. The quality of the items of the deities was indeed better. He finally understood that he was undergoing tribulation transcendence just now. As his cultivation had already broken through to the early stage of tribulation transcendence, he was still waiting for the lightning to strike him. It was good that he didn't die, so he didn't dare to complain. However, what made him feel strange was that tribulation transcendence should have 9 lightning tribulations. Could it be that he had fainted on the ground and endured the other 8 lightning strikes? Even the people watching from afar couldn't figure it out, let alone those who were asleep. It clearly looked like a tribulation transcendence, but the state of the lightning strikes was somewhat abnormal. The strangest thing was that after 2 lightning strikes, the tribulation clouds were dispersed by the golden light on the ground and the silver light that descended from the sky. Such a phenomenon was unheard of and unseen. Such a phenomenon naturally had to be reported, so the cultivators all reported what had happened. Yu Qianqiu searched the basin carefully again. When he realized that there was nothing that interested him, he flew out of the basin without another word. After finding the direction he had come from, he released the blue fire flying sword to scout ahead and quietly returned to the place where he had been entangled with the various sections. After checking, he realized that there was no one outside. He immediately felt that it was strange. Could there be an ambush outside? Thinking about it, he felt that it was possible. He retreated into the depths of the fog and disappeared. Once he returned to Utopia, he immediately found Guan Yu and asked him to come up with another battle plan. Guan Yu said in shock, "Who are you targeting this time? Damn it! Over 5,000 people are chasing after me. This is intolerable. Especially those bastards from the Jinshan kingdom." Yu Qianqiu said fiercely, "The target is very clear. The coordinates of the Jinshan Kingdom Spirit Stone Mine are all in place. I'll go scout tonight. Get ready, just like what happened to the Dian Kingdom last time." Hearing that Yu Qianqiu was being chased by over 5,000 people, Guan Yu's face sank. He nodded and said, "Don't worry, the team can assemble at any time to fight. However, don't you have to consider something? We just massacred the Dian Kingdom's Spirit Stone Mine. Will the Jinshan Kingdom be prepared?" Yu Qianqiu immediately replied, "That's why I'm going to scout. If it really causes a large number of casualties, I naturally won't act rashly. It's not worth it. However, I think their attention is not on the Spirit Stone Mine now. I'm afraid it's a good opportunity for us to strike." "Understood." Guan Yu nodded decisively. He didn't know that Yu Qianqiu had attracted a lot of attention by killing more than 2,000 people outside. Since Yu Qianqiu said it was okay, what else could he say? Dian City, Di Rong Kingdom's embassy. State Preceptor Man who led 3 junior brothers to accompany Yan Zhuixing, while 3rd brother and 4th brother stayed on Everlasting Island. At this time, Yan Zhuixing was asking a Di Rong Kingdom cultivator about Yu Qianqiu in detail. Because they didn't know that Yu Qianqiu had massacred 2,000 cultivators on the way, they were shocked when they learned about it. They didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to be so powerful. Yan Zhuixing's eyes flashed with brilliance and he kept smiling. After learning that Wen Lanfeng had come out of seclusion and had returned to Baiwan Kingdom from Monster Domain, Man who waved his hand to dismiss the cultivator and asked, "Young Palace Master, what's your next step?" "From what you said, it seems that Wen Lanfeng might have defeated the world's #1 expert. It's really admirable." Yan Zhuixing turned back and said, "I want to see the world's #2 expert. I wonder if State Preceptor has a way to take me there." This Man who pondered for a while and shook his head. It's difficult to break into Baiwan Kingdom's sacred land. I'm afraid it won't be easy to meet Wen Lanfeng. There's always a way. Yan Zhuixing pursed his lips and smiled faintly. I have a hunch that since Baiwan Kingdom is so lively, we might meet Yu Qianqiu there. Hearing that they could meet Yu Qianqiu, their faces darkened. He was the enemy who killed their 2nd brother. Man who said in a deep voice, "Since young Palace Master wants to go, we'll accompany you. Wen Lanfeng coming out of seclusion is a big deal." Maybe we can meet Master. That's great. I'm about to thank him for taking care of me. Yan Zhuixing sighed. After a short discussion, they decided on the itinerary to Baiwan Kingdom. The unusual phenomenon in the fog forest set off an uproar in the cultivation world. Such a divine event had never been heard of before. It was really unbelievable. However, what made people depressed was that this matter just had to happen in the misty forest, making people unable to investigate even if they wanted to. Then, the next day, another shocking event happened in the cultivation world. 13 spirit stone mines in the Jinshan Kingdom were all massacred overnight. Everything that could be looted was robbed, and everyone who could be killed was killed. The situation was the same as in the Dian Kingdom. All the spirit stone mines were blown up. The most arrogant thing was that the murderer did not hide anything at all. The 13 hero flags were all in the 13 spirit stone mines. It was obvious that the murderer did not care about the Jinshan Kingdom's lord, Pu Taidong. In the Jinshan Kingdom's throne room, Pu Taidong was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He looked up to the sky and roared. He couldn't figure it out, and he couldn't understand it. He didn't know what kind of bad luck he had run into. First, 5 disciples in the late tribulation passing stage had been killed, and now, all the spirit stone mines had suffered such a fate. The losses were too heavy, and his vitality was greatly damaged. This wasn't something that could be recovered in a year or two. Overnight, the entire cultivation world suddenly realized that during this period of time, either nothing happened, or something big happened, attracting everyone's attention. Everyone started counting with their fingers. First, Yin Baikong's grandson was kidnapped by a hero in the Dian Kingdom. Yin Baikong did not have any temper and paid more than 300 million spirit stones. Second, Yu Qianzhou was discovered after he snuck in. He claimed to be the #1 expert below the soul formation stage, which attracted the attention of the cultivators of the various countries. In the end, the cultivators of the various countries suffered a loss. Third, Huazhongming's 17 spirit stone mines were massacred by a hero overnight, which shocked the entire cultivation world. Fourth, Yu Qianzhou was chased by the cultivators of the various countries. After he escaped to the fog forest, he turned around and slaughtered nearly 2,000 cultivators of the various countries. This shocked the entire cultivation world again. Chapter 529. Fifth, when Lan Feng came out of seclusion, went to Demon Domain to challenge by Changchun, and then returned safely. Sixth, the divine might of heaven and earth incident in dense fog forest, which caused the entire cultivation world to boil. Seventh, the spirit stone mine in Pu Taidong's hands was massacred by the hero, which was exactly the same as Huazhongming's experience, forcing all the countries to send more manpower to defend their spirit stone mines. Previously, everyone guessed that the hero was someone who deliberately caused trouble for Yin Baikong, and then they guessed that it was an organization that deliberately caused trouble in Dian Kingdom. Now, everyone realized that something was wrong. The hero seemed to have started in Dian Kingdom, and the nearby Jinshan Kingdom suffered a calamity soon after. Who would be next? No one could be sure of the answer to this question, so they could only strengthen the defense of their own spirit stone mines. In just a short period of 2 months, the seemingly calm cultivation world had actually experienced so many major events. It was simply too much for everyone's eyes to take in. Many people liked to watch the bustle, and they would go wherever there was trouble. They realized that in their entire lives of cultivation, this was the first time they were running around so frequently. Everyone counted the 7 major events and found that as long as the hero appeared, he would do something that shocked the cultivation world. Out of the 7 major events, he took up 3. Then, out of the 7 major events, Yu Qianzhou also took up 2. The other 2 were separate events. Yu Qianzhou didn't think about this at all. To him, he didn't have anything better to do than to count his fingers and think about this. However, what others did not know was that the events caused by the hero were actually done by him, Yu Qianqiu. The other divine might of heaven incident in dense fog forest was also related to him, but even he did not know about it. In this way, out of the 7 major events, Yu Qianqiu had caused 6. If Wu Sihai of China's cultivation world knew about this, he would not be surprised, because he had long since concluded that wherever this guy went, there would be endless trouble. He was a jinx. Now, even the soul formation experts of the various countries were looking left and right, not knowing which side to focus on. After living for so many years, they had never seen such a frequent occurrence. Everyone was preparing to meet Wen Lanfeng. The commotion caused by the heavenly might of the dense fog forest made everyone want to go and take a look. However, before they could even reach the dense fog forest, Pu Taidong's spirit stone mine was once again massacred by heroes. Thus, they immediately returned to arrange for people to defend the spirit stone mine in case of an ambush. Someone joked that the 8th major event was about to arrive. When others asked him what it was, he laughed and said, "The cornucopia that happens once every 10 years. Just when everyone agreed on this statement, someone started spreading a rumor in the cultivation world, that the heavens might incident in the dense fog forest was due to the birth of a precious treasure. The object that was emitting thousands of rays of golden light was actually the 10,000 flying swords of the Myriad Swords demon monarch during the ancient war. After the news spread, the whole cultivation world was in an uproar again. Who was the Myriad Swords demon monarch? That was the #1 expert of the ancient times. It was said that countless immortals had fallen at his hands. 10,000 flying swords that could kill immortals, oh my. Not to mention 10,000, anyone who could get one would be incredible. It was much more powerful than the rare superior grade spirit treasure. Although it was just a rumor and shouldn't be easily believed, there was no smoke without fire. Everyone thought about it and agreed. The 10,000 rays of golden light could attract lightning, and in the end, 12 rays of silver light descended from the sky to suppress its power. If this wasn't a treasure, what was it? If it was a treasure that could cause such a huge commotion, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was the 10,000 flying swords of the Myriad Swords demon monarch. But everyone wasn't a fool, so they naturally had to confirm the source of the news. The whole cultivation world mobilized and traced back to the source. Very soon, they found that the source of the news was from the Golden Mountain country. Thus, the Golden Mountain country caught the person who spread the rumor. He was a loose cultivator from the Golden Mountain country. In order to get the most reliable facts, the dignified mid-stage soul formation Pu Taidong personally interrogated him. Even Hua Zhongming and other soul formation experts rushed over. In the end, that young cultivator almost peed his pants. How many people could withstand the pressure of a soul formation expert? Not to mention that there were so many of them at once. That young cultivator said, "I never thought I would see so many soul formation experts in my life. I'll accept it even if I die." Thus, he answered whatever everyone asked. In the end, that young cultivator wasn't the true source of the news. The reason was that a few nights ago, he was roasting something in the wilderness. Suddenly, someone flew over and roasted something with him. That person's roasting skills were quite good, and he even took out a lot of good wine to drink with. When the two of them chatted, they naturally talked about the Shenwei incident that caused a lot of commotion recently. That person laughed and said, "What bullsh*t Shenwei incident? I just came out of the dense fog forest and saw everything clearly." The young cultivator immediately mocked, "You really know how to brag. Do you think you're Yu Qianqiu and can come and go as you please in the fog forest? F***ck. That person laughed, "Damn it. I'm Yu Qianqiu in the first place. Do I need to pretend to be myself? Stop bragging. If you're Yu Qianqiu, then tell me, what exactly happened in the fog forest?" The young cultivator was only saying this casually. Unexpectedly, that person took it seriously. He patted his chest and said loudly, "I never lie or brag. I travel the world with my reputation. Let me tell you. What happened in the fog forest wasn't some Shenwei incident. It was a peerless treasure that was about to appear. I saw it with my own eyes." The young cultivator didn't take it seriously at all. Anyway, it was a long night and he was bored. Thus, he joked, "Then tell me what peerless treasure was about to appear." That person looked at him for a while, then shrugged, "Forget it. It doesn't matter if I tell you. You're just a small rogue cultivator. Even if you tell others, no one will believe you." He shook his head and exclaimed, "So this fog forest is the burial place of the ancient number 1 expert, Demon Lord of Thousand Swords. I didn't know at first. Coincidentally, I had just broken through to the early stage of tribulation passing and was about to undergo my tribulation. I accidentally attracted the lightning. A bolt of lightning struck down and split open a large ancient tomb. When the second bolt of lightning struck down, the ancient tomb suddenly shot out thousands of golden rays, blocking the heavenly lightning. When the lightning struck again, thousands of golden rays shot up to the sky and dispersed the tribulation clouds. I was so happy. I didn't think I would pass through the tribulation so easily." "Really?" the young cultivator asked. "Then how did you determine that the thousands of golden rays were Demon Lord of Thousand Swords flying swords?" That person said with a "don't believe me" expression, "I was curious at the time. I didn't know what helped me pass the tribulation. Thus, I went into that ancient tomb. Guess what I saw?" Although the young cultivator didn't believe him, he couldn't help but ask because of how interesting his story was. "What did you see?" That person gestured with his hands and said, "It was a huge underground space. The ground was covered with golden bricks. In the middle, there was an altar made of pure gold that was dozens of meters high. Below the altar, there were long swords that were shining with golden rays. On the altar, there was a dried corpse. If it wasn't for the inscription on the golden pillar, who could guess that the dried corpse was Demon Lord of Thousand Swords?" "What did the inscription say?" The young cultivator had already forgotten whether he was telling the truth or not. He only wanted to know the ending of the story. "It didn't say anything." That person tore a piece of roasted meat and chewed it. Then, he drank some wine and said vaguely, "Demon Lord of Thousand Swords Transcendence Golden Body. That's all. Demon Lord of Thousand Swords flying swords were stuck under the altar. Did you take a few?" "No." That person shook his head. "Ha! You gave yourself away. If it really was Demon Lord of Thousand Swords flying swords, how could you not take them out?" The young cultivator laughed. But that person sneered, "You think I didn't want to? The key is that the pressure from the swords is too strong. With my cultivation, I can't even get close. If my cultivation reaches the end of the tribulation, I might be able to take 1 or 2. The young cultivator smiled and didn't bother to argue with him. Moreover, he couldn't see through the other party's cultivation. If he angered the other party and attacked him, it would be over. Later, that person finished a pot of wine, patted his buttocks and left. The next day, when the young cultivator was chatting with someone, the other party mentioned Shenwei. In order to show off his knowledge, he said that Demon Lord of Thousand Swords flying swords were about to appear. In the end, one person spread to 10, and 10 to 100. In just a few days, everyone in the cultivation world knew about it. After listening to the young cultivator's honest confession, Pu Taidong and the others looked at each other and walked out of the interrogation room. Now, their biggest doubt was whether the person who talked to the young cultivator that night was Yu Qianqiu. According to the tone of the young cultivator, the tone really does sound like Yu Qianqiu, who likes to call himself lousy. Hua Zhongming narrowed his eyes and said, if we can prove that Yu Qianzhou's cultivation has really advanced from the nascent soul stage to the tribulation stage, then that person might really be Yu Qianzhou. Even if it's Yu Qianzhou, so what? When Pu Taidong mentioned Yu Qianzhou, he gritted his teeth and said hatefully, "Do you think that kid is telling the truth? If there really is such a place, why would he casually tell others when he saw it?" At this moment, the eldest disciple by Meng quickly ran over to report, "Master, there's news from the foot of the mountain. Yu Qianzhou's sneak attacked the disciples we sent to the mining site. Out of the dozen people that little junior brother led, he is the only one left alive." The dozen or so soul formation stage experts looked at each other and shook their heads slightly. It seemed that Yu Qianzhou planned to take revenge. Pu Taidong's face turned red and he shouted, "A bunch of useless trash. A dozen or so people can't beat a nascent soul stage cultivator. My old face has been completely lost by you all." Bai Meng didn't dare to say anything. After all, he was the one who lost the most face last time. He just lowered his head and said softly, "I heard little junior brother say that Yu Qianzhou's cultivation has increased greatly. It seems that he has already broken through to the tribulation stage. He doesn't even need to use a flying sword to fly. Even if Yu Qianzhou's cultivation has reached the early tribulation stage, so what? Have you ever seen a late tribulation stage cultivator lose to an early tribulation stage cultivator?" Pu Taidong was still shouting, but Hua Zongming stepped in between the two of them and waved his hand to interrupt. "Bai Meng, you leave first." Chapter 530. Bai Meng glanced at his master's expression and slowly retreated. Yu Qianzhou has already broken through to the early stage of tribulation passing. Interesting. Hua Zongming patted Pu Taidong's shoulder and looked back at the crowd. "What do you think?" Pu Taidong came back to his senses and said in a daze, "In that case, the person talking to this little cultivator might really be Yu Qianzhou." His gaze swept across the crowd. "Even if it's Yu Qianzhou, you don't really think there's a treasure left behind by the demon lord of thousand swords in the misty forest, do you?" Everyone was silent. There was still some doubt in this matter. They were all thinking about something. "Have you heard of a place?" The one who spoke was Tsang Yuan State's Miao Han Yuan. Everyone looked at him, waiting for him to continue. Miao Han Yuan lightly said, "Immortal Ascension Stage." "What?" Someone couldn't help but exclaim. Most of the people present were at a loss. They were unfamiliar with this term, but there were a few who were moved. Pu Taidong looked around and frowned. "Miao Han Yuan, what are you trying to say? Don't talk in riddles." Miao Han Yuan glanced at the expressionless Hua Zongming. "I'm sure Brother Hua has heard of this place." Hua Zongming smiled disapprovingly and didn't say anything. Sikong Ju, who was standing in the crowd, slowly walked out with his hands in his sleeves. "I've heard of this place from my master. Legend has it that in ancient times, when cultivators reached a certain level, they would ascend to the immortal world through a place called the Immortal Ascension Stage. However, this is only a legend. No one knows where it is. Is the Immortal Ascension Stage that Lord Miao is talking about the one I'm talking about?" He. As expected of Yin Baikong's brilliant disciple. "You're really knowledgeable." Miao Han Yuan sneered. "I happen to read a record in an ancient book. It says that a certain place is paved with countless gold bricks. In the middle, there's a platform built with gold. This platform is called the Immortal Ascension Stage. Cultivators whose cultivation surpasses the soul formation stage can ascend to the immortal world. Brother Hua, am I right?" Hua Zongming chuckled. He knew he couldn't hide it any longer, so he said, "I also thought it was strange. If the person talking to that little cultivator was really Yu Qianzhou, then why is the ancient tomb that Yu Qianzhou mentioned so similar to the legendary Immortal Ascension Stage? The floor is also paved with golden bricks, and there is also a golden platform in the middle. Could it be a coincidence? The immortal ascension stage is hidden in the fog forest. Pu Taidong asked in surprise. Miao Hanyuan narrowed his eyes and said, in my opinion, if this immortal ascension stage really exists, I'm afraid it's either in the East Holy Land or in the dense fog forest. Everyone nodded in agreement. In this world, only these two places hid secrets that were not known to outsiders. For a moment, everyone fell silent, each with their own ulterior motives. Although there was no confirmation, everyone was certain that the person was Yu Qianqiu. Moreover, the theory that the myriad swords demon lord's golden body was hidden in the immortal ascension stage was very believable. However, even if that was the case, who had the ability to enter the dense fog forest? The only thing they could do now was to capture Yu Qianqiu and force him to reveal the secret of how he could enter and exit the dense fog forest at will. The group of people with ulterior motives took their leave. When there were only 5 people who were on good terms with Pu Taidong left, Zhongming frowned and said, Miao Hanyuan, what the hell are you doing? What he was implying was, why are you forcing me to tell everyone the truth? After Pu Taidong and the others understood the truth, they also gave Miao Hanyuan a questioning look. This didn't make sense. The myriad swords demon lord's 10,000 flying swords were enough for the 6 of us to share. Why did you have to make it known to the entire cultivation world? Wasn't this just looking for trouble? Miao Hanyuan glanced at them and sneered. We weren't the only ones who heard that little cultivator's words. Do you think you can keep this secret to yourself? Humph. It won't be long before the entire cultivation world knows. The myriad swords demon lord's treasures are a huge temptation. Whoever stands at the heart of the struggle will be unlucky. The 5 of us can't withstand such a huge lightning bolt. So, let those who are capable go. The more chaotic, the better. We'd better stick together and watch from the side. There's no hurry. When the others heard this, they understood and nodded their heads in understanding. Miao Hanyuan looked at Zhongming and Pu Taidong and said, it's better for you two to bear your grudges for now. Preserving your strength is the best strategy. When the time comes, it will definitely be of great use. The 2 of them nodded in agreement. Then, the 6 of them began to make plans. Yu Qianqiu had witnessed the fall of the myriad swords demon lord's golden body in the dense fog forest, as well as the legendary immortal ascension stage. This matter quickly spread throughout the cultivation world. Even the story of that little cultivator was made public by people with intentions. This matter spread like wildfire and the cultivators of the various countries were in an uproar. Everyone understood that not just anyone could enter the dense fog forest, but Yu Qianqiu could come and go as he pleased. Now, whoever could find Yu Qianqiu and unravel the secret of entering and leaving the dense fog forest could possibly obtain the treasures left behind by the myriad swords demon lord. The World Commerce Association even offered a reward of 100 million high-grade spirit stones. Whoever could provide information on Yu Qianqiu and lead the World Commerce Association to find Yu Qianqiu would be able to obtain the 100 million high-grade spirit stones. Of course, whether or not they could catch him was the World Commerce Association's business. As long as the information provided was useful, they could obtain the reward. This time, it was lively. The World Commerce Association had used their powerful financial resources to set up informants in the entire cultivation world. Those cultivators with low cultivation could only dream about the treasures of the myriad swords demon lord. No one thought they could obtain them. However, the reward of 100 million high-grade spirit stones was something that anyone could hope to obtain. For a moment, the various countries were filled with low-level cultivators scurrying around with dreams of getting rich. The cornucopia gathering, which was originally ranked 8th in the cultivation world, was moved back to 9th place. Now, the 8th major event was that the various countries were looking for Yu Qianqiu in order to obtain the treasures left behind by the myriad swords demon lord. The Jinshan country could be said to be in the eye of this matter because the last time Yu Qianqiu appeared, he was in the Jinshan country. Moreover, the dense fog forest was also within the borders of the Jinshan country. Who dared to say that Yu Qianqiu himself did not want to obtain the treasures left behind by the myriad swords demon lord? It was said that it was only because his cultivation was not high enough that he could not obtain it. Presumably, he was still thinking of a way. Therefore, the chances of finding Yu Qianqiu within the borders of the Jinshan country was the highest. Those cultivators with low cultivation often traveled in groups of 3 to 5. It was precisely because of their low cultivation that they formed groups for safety. At this time, Yu Qianqiu also joined a team of 3 people looking for Yu Qianqiu as a rogue cultivator. In order to dream of getting rich, the 3 people wandered everywhere within the borders of the Jinshan country. Among the 3 people, 2 of them were only at the middle stage of foundation establishment, so Yu Qianqiu claimed to be at the early stage of core formation and showed a little of his skill, subduing the other 2 and becoming the leader of the group of 3. The capital of the Jinshan country, Gold Casting City, in the wilderness dozens of miles north of the city, there was a large connected villa. This villa was originally built by a wealthy businessman for leisure purposes. Later, because it was ransacked by bandits, the entire villa's several hundred people were all killed, and it became an inauspicious place. Coupled with the frequent haunting, this place became the famous Ghost Manor. In fact, the so-called haunting was just a prank made by some rogue cultivators who had nowhere to stay. But over time, the reputation of the Ghost Manor spread, and mortals would definitely keep a respectful distance. Therefore, this place was occupied by rogue cultivators from all over the country. Of course, there was no lack of cultivators with backgrounds from various countries temporarily resting. Chapter 531. Yu Qianqiu's group of 3 also came to the Ghost Manor because of its fame. The so-called fame was just an excuse that Yu Qianqiu used to fool the other 2. In reality, it was because he knew that this place was a good place to gather information. The other 2 didn't have any objections. During this period of time, they followed Yu Qianqiu and ate well and had a lot of fun. Moreover, whenever they encountered a little trouble, the boss could always easily solve it. The 2 felt that it was good to continue living like this. No one expected to meet Yu Qianqiu and become rich. In short, their lives were much better than before. They no longer had to be timid because of their low cultivation. Boss would take care of everything, and they only needed to be obedient and run errands. The Ghost Manor was surrounded by mountains and rivers. Under the lush green mountains, there was a small bridge beside the flowing water. It occupied an area of more than 100 mu and had a grand layout. This kind of livable place was rare in the entire Golden Mountain country. It could be seen that the owner who built it was indeed rich. However, from the peeling paint on the walls and the old marks that were covered with moss, one could see that it lacked maintenance. The 3 of them landed in the center of the Ghost Manor on their flying swords. They looked around and saw groups of loose cultivators bragging. Seeing that someone had come, those loose cultivators only glanced at them and continued to brag. No one paid attention to them. It was Yu Qianqiu's first time here. He thought that this place was in disrepair and should be dilapidated. He didn't expect that the inside would be so tidy. The seedlings and flower beds that were scattered around were lush and green. Not even a single weed could be seen. It was obvious that someone had been taking care of it. "Boss, let's go see if there are any empty rooms." The one who spoke was called Qin Jiaxing. The other one was called Fu Chun. Yu Qianqiu looked around and waved his hand, indicating that they should go ahead and look around. It was clearly not their first time here. They greeted each other and went out of the east and west gates of the garden. They were very familiar with the way. Yu Qianqiu was no longer called Yu Qianqiu, but Niu Yud. His face was no longer his original face. He had put on another human skin mask. Back when he was in Shirwangguang's military camp, he had prepared a few masks in advance, as if he had a premonition that they would come in handy. A one-armed old man in the garden caught Yu Qianqiu's attention. His hair and beard were white, and he wore a gray robe with an empty left sleeve pinned to his belt. The old man looked old, but his back was straight. He was controlling a flying sword with one hand to prune the weeds and plants in the garden. He looked like a servant in the manner, but since he could control a flying sword, he was clearly not a servant. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He looked at the nursery beds around him. It seemed like it was all thanks to this old man that everything looked so neat and tidy. He actually couldn't see through his cultivation. Yu Qianqiu muttered to himself. He was now in the early stage of the crossing calamity stage. Among the rogue cultivators he had met recently, there were few who had a higher cultivation than him. He didn't expect that an inconspicuous disabled rogue cultivator would have a higher cultivation than him. What surprised him the most was that this old man's cultivation was at least in the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage, but he was doing this rough work here. Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin and frowned. He walked up to the old man and cupped his hands, saying, "May I ask if you are the owner of this place?" Ha! As soon as Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, he heard a lot of laughter around him. He looked around and saw groups of rogue cultivators staring at him and laughing. It was obvious that they were laughing at him. Yu Qianqiu looked at himself and touched his face. He didn't find anything wrong, so he didn't know why they were laughing at him. So he cupped his hands and said, "I'm no Yud. I'm new here. Why are you laughing at me? But what did I say or do wrong?" When he said this, he looked at the old man behind him with an inquiring look. However, the old man seemed to be oblivious to his own business and only cared about cutting his own branches. "You don't need to say anything. We also know that you are new here," someone said coldly. Then a group of people laughed again. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and saw several people sitting unsteadily on the railings of a corridor separated by a red-crowned branch eaves. One of them was leaning against a pillar and playing with a bamboo flute in his hand. He glanced at him disdainfully, giving off a cool feeling. Yo! He looks so young, but his cultivation has already reached the early stage of the nascent soul realm. No wonder he learned to look at people sideways. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. He didn't know what he had done to provoke him, so he pointed at him and asked, "Stupid bird, did you say that just now?" Ha! The laughter around him sounded again, but the faces of those people opposite him didn't look so good. They all stood up and shouted at the same time, "Who are you talking about?" "I say, him, there are a few holes in the bamboo, but he's still trying to act cool and make a fool of himself." Yu Qianqiu's tone, as well as his hand gesture, was just short of poking his forehead with his finger. If Nongzhu heard this, she would definitely fight with him. What a joke. What kind of people did Yu Qianqiu usually meet and what kind of things he did? If he randomly picked someone he knew, these guys would look up to him. Just by showing off something he had done, he was able to stun these fellows. Even if it was his own reputation, it was earned through fighting and not through bragging. As long as he flashed his name, he would be able to scare these guys to the point where they would be looking for their teeth on the ground. Nowadays, he had a famous title in the cultivation world. The Butcher of the Cultivation World. The two sides were not at the same level at all. He didn't want to argue with these low-level people at all, so he tried to be polite when talking to them. Who knew that the world was full of bastards who looked down on others and bullied the weak and feared the strong? He worked hard and risked his life to climb to this point. It was good enough that he didn't bully others casually. How could he be humiliated by others casually? The cultivator with the bamboo flute began to look at Yu Qianqiu directly. When he found that he couldn't see through his cultivation, his face changed slightly. He stretched out his hands to block the people around him and said softly, "His cultivation is higher than mine." After that, he cupped his hands and smiled apologetically to Yu Qianqiu. The other people's faces also changed. They didn't dare to say anything and sat down quietly. In the cultivation world, those who couldn't stand being bullied were usually short-lived, especially these rogue cultivators who didn't have any background. There was always a higher mountain. If you wanted to be tyrannical, you had to bully the weak. If you wanted to compromise, you had to pretend to be a grandson. This was the general rule of the cultivation world. Even those soul formation experts had to smile carefully when they saw Bai Chongqun. There were some things and some people that no one could afford to offend. Ha! The people around them burst into laughter again. Yu Qianqiu stared at them and snorted coldly. If it wasn't for the old guy who he didn't know anything about and didn't want to expose himself too much, with his temper, he wouldn't be able to avoid beating these guys, let alone killing them. What he hated the most was those stupid birds who acted cool without any ability. These kind of people were disgusting and should be killed. At this time, Qin Jiaxing and Fu Chun came back almost at the same time. The two of them were slightly stunned when they saw their boss standing beside the old man. Yu Qianqiu raised his thumb and poked the back of his shoulder. Who is this old guy? He ignored me when I asked him. Fu Chun walked over and dragged him with a bitter smile. Boss, this senior is deaf and mute. He can't hear you when you ask him. How can he answer you? Qin Jiaxing laughed slyly at the side. He had a shifty-eyed face to begin with, and this laugh made him look even more filthy. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Now he understood why everyone laughed at him. He was talking to a deaf and mute stupidly. It would be strange if others didn't laugh. Did you find an empty room? Qin Jiaxing scratched his head at Fu Chun and said, the houses on the east side have all been occupied. With Yu Qianqiu's disturbance, it seems like everyone has rushed over to the Jinshan kingdom to join in the fun. The weather is not good. Who knows when it will rain? It's understandable that there are so many people. Fu Chun looked at the sky and frowned. There are a few rooms on the west side. Unfortunately, they are occupied by a few women. I discussed with them and wanted them to squeeze in, but they refused. Women? Qin Jiaxing asked with interest. Do they look like water? You're interested? Fu Chun said with disdain. The 6 disciples of the Misty Rain House of Passion Lake. You can go and try. Misty Rain House of Passion Lake. Qin Jiaxing shrunk his head and smiled. Forget it. I can't afford to offend them. Misty Rain House of Passion Lake of Lu Nangua. Yu Qianqiu turned around and asked. Seeing the two of them nodding their heads, he paused and asked. How many rooms did they occupy? Fu Chun shook her head. They are arrogant. 6 of them occupied 6 rooms. Qin Jiaxing muttered. The disciples of big clans are awesome. He could hear the helplessness in his voice. Yu Qianqiu looked up at the sky. It might really rain. Although cultivators were not afraid of rain, it was not a good feeling to not have a place to rest on a rainy night. Of course it would be comfortable to stay in an inn in Gold Casting City. But didn't he want to get some information? Thus, he raised his hand. Bring me there. I will go and talk to them. Qin Jiaxing winked. Boss can handle 2 people at once. It will definitely be settled. He then led the way with Fu Chun. Yu Qianqiu took a few steps and stopped. He turned around and walked to the side of the elder. Although he knew the elder couldn't hear him, he still cupped his fists and bowed. I was ignorant just now. If I offended you, please forgive me. The elder's back was facing him. He continued with his work and probably didn't hear him. Yu Qianqiu didn't mind. He walked in front of the elder and waved his hand. The elder stopped and stared at him coldly. The people around them stared at them. They didn't know what this rascal was trying to do. Yu Qianqiu smiled at the elder to show that he didn't have any bad intentions. He took out a jar of good wine from his storage bag and stuffed it into the elder's arms. He turned around and left. Chapter 532. He had no ulterior motives. He simply felt that this old man's cultivation was not low, but he was willing to give up ostentatious things to do this rough work. He was worthy of respect. His view of life was that he liked to distinguish good and bad from bad, and to see a person's character from little by little. It was that simple. He definitely did not have any ulterior motives towards this old man. Besides, he did not see how this old man could be taken advantage of. However, his actions caused a flash of surprise to flash across the old man's eyes. Then, he threw the wine into his storage bag and continued with his work. The courtyards of large families were indeed deep. After the three of them walked around for a while, they could see groups of 2 or 3 chatting on almost every road. The topics were all Yu Qianqiu and matters related to Mist Forest. Yu Qianqiu's face tightened. There was no need to talk about how depressed he was. He had set a trap for himself, and in the end, he had fallen into it. Yes, he had deliberately spread the news about the Myriad Swords Demon Lord in Mist Forest. His goal was to gather a bunch of people into Mist Forest, and then ruthlessly slaughter a bunch of them, so that they would not bully others with their numbers. To put it bluntly, he was still angry at being hunted down by thousands of people. Weren't you guys crazy for 2 treasured swords? Then now that I have a treasure of the Myriad Swords Demon Lord, I'm sure it will make you guys even crazier. However, he had miscalculated. This bunch of people had all changed their temperaments. They were very patient, and did not make a move. Instead of going to Mist Forest to study how to enter, they had all set their sights on him. Thus, he had tried to seduce them several times in Mist Forest, but they did not fall for it. Instead, they patiently waited for him to come out, prepared to capture him alive, and not prepared to fight him to the death. This caused him to lose his temper, and he could only come out to find a chance to cause trouble. Who knew that after he did not appear, the World Commerce Association became even more despicable? Relying on their wealth, they actually put a bounty of 100 million, causing him to change his appearance again. If he had known this would happen, he would have blackmailed Ian Baikong for a few hundred million. How regretful. What depressed him the most was that in order to make his story about the Myriad Swords Demon Lord more believable, he had used the terrain of the basin to make his story more believable. Who would have thought that those guys would be able to guess that it was the Immortal Ascension stage? Everyone knew of the Immortal Ascension stage, but he had never heard of it. Failure. She followed Qin Jiaxing and Fu Chen as they turned left and right in the manor. Finally, they arrived at a courtyard with a single door that was half covered by grapevines. The green grape seeds were thick and plump and had yet to ripen. The 3 of them walked in. There were indeed 6 rooms inside, 2 facing each other, forming a long cylindrical garden. Looking at the layout, when this family was still prosperous, this should have been a corner where the servants lived. However, in this situation, because it was a private courtyard, there were no people coming and going to disturb him. It was quiet. Under the grape trellis, there was a round stone table. 4 women in pink were sitting, and 2 were standing. Before they came in, they could still hear the chatter inside, but now, they were all staring at the 3 people who came in. Yu Qianqiu casually glanced at them. Their looks were not bad, but they were still lacking compared to his woman. As she was sizing them up, a woman who was sitting suddenly stood up and walked over with a sneer on her face. She stared at Fu Chen and coldly said, "What? You still haven't given up?" That woman's eyes were big and bright. She had a round face and a sharp chin. With one look, one could tell that she was not someone to be trifled with. Fu Chen and Qin Jiaxing subconsciously shrank back. To them, a disciple of the Misty Rain House of the Passion Lake could kill itinerant cultivators like them as easily as crushing 2 ants. No matter how powerful Boss Neo was, he could not face a colossus like the Misty Rain House. The Misty Rain House was indeed a colossus in the cultivation world, but the two of them had underestimated their boss. Not to mention the Misty Rain House, Yu Qianqiu had even made a move on the World Commerce Association, which was known as the most powerful force in the cultivation world. Yu Qianqiu's expression immediately darkened. He looked at the 2 people beside him. These 2 underlings had really made him proud. They were really not presentable. Especially in front of a woman. With me here, they actually dared to cower. He could not help but let out a cold humph. He had been eating and drinking well during this period of time. Fu Chun braced herself and stepped forward, saying, "This is our boss. He has personally come to discuss with you." "Boss?" That woman laughed unscrupulously and said, "Mere itinerant cultivators dare to call themselves boss in front of the Misty Rain House. You really don't know what's good for you. Come, let me see how much your boss is worth." As she spoke, she walked closer and sized up Yu Qianqiu. Her slender fingers rolled up her sleeves as if she was really going to teach him a lesson. "Discuss my ass." Yu Qianqiu was enraged. He pulled Fu Chun to the back and stared at the approaching woman with a cold smile. "If you wave that big chest of yours in front of me again, I don't care if you are from the Misty Rain House or not. Be careful that I don't crush it." Once he said that, everyone was shocked. They all suspected that they had heard wrongly. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing looked at each other. The 5 women at the stone table were even more dumbfounded. The woman standing in front of Yu Qianqiu opened her mouth wide, her face full of disbelief. When she saw Yu Qianqiu raise his hand, she cried out in fright and took a few steps back. Then, she said angrily, "How dare you? You dare to humiliate the Misty Rain House. Misty Rain House. What a great reputation." Yu Qianqiu chuckled coldly and said, "You were the one who bullied me first. Now, you want to put **T on me. You can always find a reason to accuse me. But it's fine. I'll play with you anytime. You're courting death." That woman raised her hand, and 3 silver lights appeared in her hand. Upon closer inspection, they were actually 3 thin needles that were about a foot long. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes. There was actually someone who used such an artifact. "Junior sister, stop." The 5 women at the stone table cried out in surprise. The woman who attacked did not notice, but they realized that they could not see through her cultivation. In addition, from her words, she did not seem to care about the Misty Rain House. Clearly, she was not an ordinary person. This was not their first time in the cultivation world. When they understood that the name of the Misty Rain House could only frighten the timid. When someone really dared to make a move, they still had to avoid the strong and go for the weak. This was something that must be understood in the cultivation world. Otherwise, they would be playing with their lives. However, they seemed to have shouted a little too late. Moreover, in her rage, she did not care about what was right or wrong. A silver light scattered out from her hand, forming a silver rainbow under the green grapevines. It shot straight at Yu Qianqiu's chest. "Insignificant tricks. You dare to use them to embarrass yourself." Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and hit the silver light with his palm. The silver needle went straight into his palm, and his hand immediately clenched into a fist. "Boss!" Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing cried out in surprise. They rushed over and released their flying swords at the same time. The 2 of them sandwiched Yu Qianqiu in the middle and looked at his fist worriedly. Imagine how it would feel to have a silver needle that was more than a foot long in your hand. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the 2 of them, and his expression became slightly better. Because of the 2 of them retreating, he had a stomach full of anger. But now, it seemed that he did not make a mistake in choosing these two as his underlings. At the crucial moment, they still had some conscience and knew to care for him. It was not in vain that he fed them well. Otherwise, he would have made them spit it out with interest. The 5 women at the stone table heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that this person was just a pretentious flower. However, the expression of the woman who released the flying needle changed. Others might not know, but she knew that the moment the flying needle went into the other party's palm, it had completely severed its connection with her. She sized up Yu Qianqiu again, and her expression changed again. She could not see through his cultivation. Knowing that she had encountered a cultivator, she did not dare to act rashly. Yu Qianqiu coldly glanced at the women and snorted. A few core formation stage girls dare to not know the immensity of heaven and earth. One day, I will go to the pavilion of misty rain at the Passion Lake to take a look and see how Yunantian teaches his disciples. A man who only takes in female disciples, it would be strange if he could teach them well. The Yunantian he was talking about was the leader of Lu Nangua, an expert of the intermediate stage of the demigod realm. He called himself the pavilion master of the pavilion of misty rain at the Passion Lake. It was a very elegant title. When these words were spoken, the expressions of the women became somewhat uneasy. Especially what Yu Qianqiu did next, it made the women even more frightened. They saw Yu Qianqiu raise one of his clenched fists, and as he opened his fingers, fine silver powder gently floated down and slowly fell like a drizzle. It faintly formed a layer on the ground. The women were dumbstruck. This was a little too frightening. They did not know how high this person's level of cultivation was. Not only did he dare to open his hand to grab an instrument, but he also crushed the instrument into powder in the blink of an eye. Thinking about what he said just now, it seemed like the pavilion of misty rain at the Passion Lake was just a place he could go whenever he wanted, and he even dared to call Yunantian by his name. This was not something a normal loose cultivator would dare to say. In addition to this frightening method, the identity of this person in front of them became even more mysterious. Even Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing looked at each other. Their heads were full of doubts. Only now did they realize that this boss was not simple. Yu Qianqiu expressionlessly glanced at them, but he was secretly very proud. Ever since he understood the gold spell, he did not believe that the gold spell could only play tricks like turning stone into gold. That would be too boring. Thinking about how his master asked Gnome Zhu to pass on a message to teach him the water spell, he secretly pondered for a long time. The power of the fire spell was being released, and the power of the water spell was being absorbed. Then, the gold spell should also have a way to release its power. Hiding in the basin of the mist forest, he pondered over and over again. After endless attempts, he finally found the way. Only then did he realize that the gold spell could not only absorb gold, it could also absorb the elements of any metal. After experimenting for a while, he finally comprehended an incredible technique. It seemed that as long as it was a metal, it could be instantly decomposed under the power of the gold spell. A piece of gold could be turned into gold powder, and in a flash, it could be condensed back into a piece of gold. Whether it was dark steel or nether iron, in short, he tried all kinds of metals that he had. He did not know if he did not try, but when he tried, he was shocked. This gold spell was too domineering. He tried refining instruments with various metal materials from Chenfeng, but none of them could withstand the power of the gold spell. They were instantly turned into dust. Chapter 533. He didn't know if there were any metals that couldn't be decomposed by the gold art. In any case, none of the metals he had could withstand the power of the gold art. Today was the first time he had tried out his skills. As expected, he shocked his brothers and sisters. It felt great to act tough. "Do you really want to fight me?" Yu Qianqiu said disdainfully. The woman who attacked him took a few steps back in panic. She had never seen such a technique before. She believed that even an expert in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage wouldn't be able to crush her magic tool with one palm. In other words, the person in front of her was someone who had surpassed the final phase of the tribulation passing stage. The girls also thought of this. A frightening guess appeared in their minds: this person was an expert in the soul-forming stage. No wonder he dared to call Enchanting by his name. At least, based on his cultivation level, he couldn't be an ordinary loose cultivator. The woman looked at her sisters for help. The girls exchanged glances and quickly walked over. They lined up in a row and bowed in unison. One of them was an intelligent woman. She was probably the leader of the group. She cupped her hands and said, "May I know which senior has arrived? We were reckless. Please forgive us. Not fighting anymore." Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly. "We wouldn't dare." The intelligent woman said respectfully, "Senior's power is not something we can resist. We don't dare to be rash. Please tell us your name. When we return, we will apologize to our masters." Yu Qianqiu didn't answer her. Instead, he asked, "What generation are you disciples in the Misty Rain House?" He remembered something recorded in the Jade Archive. Lu Nonggua's Enchanting was a man. He was obviously a man, but he only accepted female disciples. It was said that he had a lot of beautiful women under him. All the disciples he taught were of the love generation. The disciples of the disciples were arranged according to the 5 words, Passion Lake Misty Rain House. When the girls heard his question, they knew that he wouldn't argue with them anymore. They sighed in relief. However, they didn't know that Yu Qianqiu didn't want to make a big deal out of this. It was fine if he acted tough. Otherwise, they would suffer. Smoky rainbow, smoky fay, smoky clear, smoky rue, hazy dawn. The girls took the initiative to report their names. The leading girl cupped her fists and said, "Yen Lan, we are all disciples with the surname Yen." "Ah. So much smoke, it's really suffocating." Yu Qianqiu muttered. His gaze swept across the few of them and said, "There's no need to be so courteous. I'll have to trouble everyone to vacate this room." Although his words were tactful, there was an unquestionable tone to them. The girls didn't dare to have any objections and immediately went to make arrangements. The woman who made the move was called Haze. Seeing Yu Qianqiu's eyes sweeping over her big chest, she was scared and trembling. Remembering that this senior had just said that he would crush it, she quickly lowered her head and walked away. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing stood at the side and felt a little unnatural. They no longer dared to talk and laugh like before. They didn't expect that they would follow an unknown master. Yu Qianqiu looked at the two of them and frowned. "You two, stiffen your backs in the future. Don't embarrass me." The two of them said yes and subconsciously straightened their backs. It was hard to tell whether they were nervous or excited. They were nervous and excited because this boss was really awesome. Soon, not only were the rooms vacated, but there were 3 of them. The girls gave the best one to Yu Qianqiu. When Yu Qianqiu arrived at the room, he drove Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing out and asked them to inquire about the news. He was lying on the bed thinking about the problem. He needed to sort out what had happened during this time. If he didn't have a clue and rushed around, sooner or later, he would fall into someone else's trap. There was a woman's body fragrance on the bed. Yu Qianqiu's eyelids gradually drooped and he slowly fell asleep. It was not that he was physically weak, but he didn't need to constantly refine his qi and practice like others. Ever since he formed his gold core, he hadn't meditated to refine his qi. The things in his dantian would automatically refine them. Whenever he felt mentally exhausted, he always liked to sleep to relieve it. Otherwise, his brain wouldn't be able to stop. Other people couldn't see that he was mentally exhausted, so they all thought he was a lunatic. While he was half asleep, he was awakened by the whispers outside. The light in the room was hazy, and the paper window was slightly white. It seemed that the sky was about to turn dark. He got off the bed and opened the door to take a look. Sure enough, it was already dark. The 6 women and 2 men who were huddled together at the door all turned to look at him. "Senior Nyo." The girls saluted together. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing called out, "Boss." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the 2 guys. It seemed that they had already told his name to the girls. But it didn't matter. In any case, it wasn't his real name. From the looks of it, the 2 fellows had already gotten close to the 6 women and were able to get along well with them. "Jijizi, what's the matter?" Yu Qianqiu asked. "Boss, it's like this." Qin Jiaxing scratched his head and said, "There will be a lot of cultivators gathering at Ghost Manor's mountain-leaning pavilion at night. It's a good opportunity to get some information. We want to ask Boss if he wants to go." While they were talking, several groups of people were already flying toward the back of the mountain on their swords. "Oh." Yu Qianqiu looked up at the sky. The sky, which was originally covered with dark clouds, had cleared up. It probably wouldn't rain anymore. After thinking for a while, he nodded and said, "Go, let's join in the fun." Then he pointed at the girls and said, "Don't call me senior anymore." The girls looked at each other. They all knew that he didn't want to expose his identity. The leader, Yan Lan, nodded and said, "Understood. Don't call me senior, call me Mr." The girls saluted at the same time and said, "Greetings, Mr." The 6 sweet voices made people's bones go numb. Yu Qianqiu quivered. He waved his hand and said, "Fine, fine, fine. Let's go." He threw a flying sword and stepped on it. His cooperative action instantly reduced the pressure on the girls. They couldn't help but cover their mouths and chuckle. They punched and hit Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing with their fists and pushed them away. The 2 of them didn't care about being hit at all. They laughed so hard that they almost couldn't tell north from south. They happily stepped on their swords and chased after Boss. Think about it, if they hadn't met Boss, the Misty Rain Pavilion's female disciples wouldn't have flirted with them. Their days were getting better and better. It was really a happy life as a lone cultivator. The mountain-leaning pavilion was built on a hillside behind Ghost Manor. At the bottom of the hillside was a flat grassland. Under the night sky, there was a big bonfire in the middle of the grassland. There were also many small bonfires around it. The lone cultivators came from all over the world. There were all kinds of countries. Actually, the boundaries between countries didn't mean anything to them. That was because they couldn't get any protection from the countries they were born in. They were just lone cultivators who didn't join any sections. How many cultivators who came from sects would pay attention to them? In the cultivation world, they were like ants. They wandered around alone and didn't care about the boundaries between countries. While they struggled to find longevity, they could only live and get drunk today. The bonfire roasted the wild game, making the faces of the people near it red. The fragrance of the wine wafted in the wind. The wind of the wilderness blew gently. There was also an unorthodox song full of vicissitudes. Some people sang along. It was a different kind of style that lingered under the mountain-leaning pavilion. When Yu Qianqiu and the others arrived, they immediately attracted many people's attention. Most importantly, the 6 pink-clothed girls' uniforms were too eye-catching. Anyone with a bit of knowledge would know that they were from the Misty Rain Pavilion of Lu Nan's National Love Lake. Yu Qianqiu looked around. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing were on his left and right, and the 6 girls were behind the 3 of them. Many people recognized Yu Qianqiu as the ruffian from earlier in the day, but they didn't understand what he meant. Why would the Misty Rain Pavilion's people surround and protect 3 lone cultivators? Yu Qianqiu's identity immediately made people try to figure it out. In the eyes of the crowd, he also seemed tall and mighty. Many people's eyes were filled with envy. Being able to associate with people from large sects was a matter of great pride for lone cultivators. Usually, when there was a fight between lone cultivators, if the weaker party said that they knew someone from a large sect, the stronger party usually wouldn't dare to be ruthless. Fong Ming, who are these three fellows? Look at their shifty-eyed faces. How did they get involved with the Misty Rain Pavilion? The voice wasn't loud, but it was full of jealousy. The person who said this was one of the people who had talked back to Yu Qianqiu during the day. The five of them surrounded a bonfire. The person called Fong Ming was the young man who often played with his flute. The bonfire found a trace of jealousy in his bright eyes. TSK. 6 female disciples from the Misty Rain Pavilion. If each of us could get one of them, we would have at least 100 years to work hard. Another person shook his head and sighed. This made the jealousy in Fong Ming's eyes intensify. This was how the cultivation world was. If a lone cultivator could become Dao companions with someone from a large sect, they would be considered to have pledged allegiance to that sect. Basically, their status as a lone cultivator would end. Usually, female lone cultivators would marry into large sections. However, it was relatively difficult for male lone cultivators to marry female disciples from large sections. Unless it was an extremely talented person. First, it had to be someone that the large sects would take an interest in and want to recruit. Second, it had to be a female disciple of a large sect who took an interest in you and begged you to marry them. Otherwise, the chances would be very slim. The relationship between men and women in the cultivation world was very realistic. For many people, if dual cultivation didn't help, they would rather cultivate alone. That way, it would be less burdensome. Yu Qianqiu looked around with a trace of surprise in his eyes. He didn't expect to see such a scene in the cultivation world. Interesting. He raised his hand and said, "Get some firewood. Let's light a bonfire here and join in the fun." Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing immediately flew into the mountain to look for firewood. The women were more meticulous and immediately cleaned the grass on the spot. What a joke. Although they were from the Misty Rain Pavilion, they had basically never seen Yunanshan's face. Even if they saw him, they would only look at him from afar. Now that they had a spirit-severing cultivator with the same cultivation as their ancestor, they had to serve him well. Yu Qianqiu didn't care about the gazes around him. Although he looked like a lone cultivator, he was like a crane in a flock of chickens. He crossed his arms and looked at the hillside. There were 4 incandescent cages hanging on the 4 corner pavilions on the hillside. He could clearly see the situation in the pavilion. A one-armed old man was sitting there alone, holding a jar of wine and drinking alone. Chapter 534. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth raised into a smile. He could recognize that the jar of wine was given to him by him. It was indeed a good wine. It was the Yin Wind wine taken from Yu Ji of the Demon Ghost region. It was not a good wine that anyone could drink. The old man's eyes seemed to always look at him intentionally or unintentionally. Their eyes met several times. Yu Qianqiu smiled back, but the old man's eyes were still cold. As a result, Yu Qianqiu was very sullen, so he simply turned around. In front of him, nearly 1,000 people had gathered here. They were drinking and eating to their heart's content, giving off a forthright atmosphere of the Jianghu. This was a feeling that Yu Qianqiu liked very much, and it made him feel much better. Heaven, earth, I am here, drifting, where can I go? Under the starry night sky, under the bonfire. Some people bared their teeth and brandished their claws around the bonfire, dancing a strange dance like a big crab. Some people even took out their flying swords and hit them with a clanking sound, singing a wild tune with their mouths. It was a pure man's tune. Pride and frustration were roared out from their throats. Even if they were drunk, they would still wake up. Although the world was big, tomorrow, they would still be unknown little rogue cultivators. You are from the Misty Rain Tower, right? Let us help you. Several people sitting around on the side had been staring here. Seeing the 6 women doing rough work, someone finally couldn't help but start to strike up a conversation. As soon as they opened their mouth, 7 or 8 wolf-like men couldn't wait to get up and rush over here. Get out of here. Hazy Haze roared, scaring several people and making them sit back down. This caused the surrounding people to roar with laughter. Although the laughter was forthright, there was some bitterness hidden in it. It was not known whether they were laughing at those people who were defeated or laughing at themselves for wanting to eat swan meat. Several women were busy around Yuchincho's feet. Yuchincho stood there with his arms crossed, tilting his head to look at the movement just now. There was a faint smile on his face, and he was not angry because of those people's collision just now. In his previous life, he had started out as a commoner, so he naturally had a better understanding of the mentality of the small fry. These people clearly wanted to curry favor with the Misty Rain Pavilion's female disciple, hoping to gain a favorable impression of them and escape their lonely status as independent cultivators. If he was like them now, would he also want to rely on this method to get a higher position? Yuchincho looked into the distance. The answer in his heart was no. He admitted that he was not a good person. Perhaps the methods he used were more bloody, violent, or evil, but he would never use such a method. Because he was ambitious, daring to think, daring to work hard, daring to risk his life, daring to challenge an unfair fate, and unswerving determination to move forward, he was destined to have a bigger stage. If he couldn't succeed, he would just have to die. That was how a man should be. Crawling under a woman's skirt, wagging his tail to beg for pity, or to win sympathy, were just small tricks. Once he did that, the road he had to walk would be even more bumpy, and he would have to endure even more humiliation. At this moment, Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing each carried a large bundle of firewood back, and they even carried a pheasant and a wild hare in their hands. They showed off to the women, and their faces were full of smiles. This caused the women to cheer, and they grabbed the firewood and prepared to barbecue it. Yuchincho's eyes flickered as he looked at the two of them, and he backed off, making space in the middle for them to pile the firewood. After the bonfire was lit, the few of them sat around it. The 3 men here could be said to be a thorn in everyone's side, and they were too enviable. There was a man between every 2 women, and there were 2 other women who were busy barbecuing. Yuchincho took out a few jars of good wine, and threw them to the few of them. He picked up the wine jars, removed the clay seals, and drank to his heart's content. After that, he put down the wine jars, and attentively listened to the conversations around him. Damn it! His limelight had been stolen by these girls. Yuchincho cursed in his heart, and realized that the people around him were all talking about the 6 women around him, and it seemed like all of them wanted to get close to him. Fortunately, there was still a group of people talking about business. Forget it. Don't look. No matter how delicious the meat is, we can't bite it. Let's talk about that Yuchincho. What's the use of talking about him? That butcher is hiding somewhere, and it's really easy to find him. Have you heard? World Commerce's Guan Zhongkai has already brought a large amount of reward money, and is holding down the fort in Gold Casting City. If anyone can get news of Yuchincho, they can directly report it. It's not just Guan Zhongkai. I heard that there are also 8 World Commerce's late-stage tribulation passing experts following him. Hee. That's nothing. It's said that Yin Baikong's eldest disciple, Sikong Ju, is leading a large group of World Commerce's experts to await orders. As long as they find Yuchincho, they will personally come out. If that's the case, then World Commerce is determined to get him. Of course, World Commerce's wealth is unparalleled, and world commerce's influence is the greatest in the world. Yin Baikong's cultivation is one of the top 10 experts in the cultivation world. Hey! Look, that woman's breasts are really big. Damn! This can also change the topic. Yu Qianqiu was listening attentively, and almost choked to death by these words that were cut off halfway. Following the gaze of those people, he saw that they were talking about hazy haze, which really made him speechless. Woo! 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 Suddenly, an ethereal and graceful sound of a flute rang out in the surroundings, leisurely floating in the night sky. The surrounding noise suddenly quieted down, and everyone looked for the source of the sound. In the end, everyone's gazes all fell on the hillside pavilion at the top of the hill. On the hillside illuminated by the bonfire, under the incandescent light of the pavilion, a graceful figure was facing downwards. Blue muslin clothes, blue muslin hat, and one couldn't see her true appearance. Her slender jade-like fingers rose and fell, holding a flute vertically and playing it under the cover of the blue muslin. There was a faint and inexplicable sorrow in the song, and no one knew what the player was thinking. Yu Qianqiu could be considered a person who had a rough understanding of music now. Listening attentively, he felt that this woman's tune was filled with endless loneliness and endless blankness. In reality, this song was a bit out of tune, and was completely played at will. After listening for a while, everyone felt very bored, and began to discuss again. However, they were all guessing what the woman's appearance under the blue muslin was like. Because just looking at that graceful figure, it was indeed a first-class figure. The blue muslin clothes wrapped around a plump and well-proportioned body. She was neither tall nor short, and her hands were also pure white and crystal clear. However, no one knew what her face looked like. The strangest thing was that the one-armed old man was actually standing behind her in a somewhat respectful manner, slightly bowing his head in silence. Everyone who had some understanding of Ghost Village knew that this old man's cultivation wasn't low. Although he was disabled with his existence, no one dared to act recklessly in Ghost Village. Actually, all the wandering cultivators who were able to settle down here had to thank this old man. If it wasn't for his existence, Ghost Village would have long been abandoned. It was he who had been quietly taking care of this place, and gave everyone a place to settle down. Most importantly, if anyone was chased by enemies, they would be safe if they hid here. It seemed like no one dared to seek revenge in Ghost Village. Such a mysterious old man was now obediently standing behind a woman. This was something that none of the wandering cultivators had ever seen before. Everyone didn't even need to think to know that this woman's origin was definitely not ordinary. Do any of you know where this one-armed old man came from? Yu Qianqiu asked the people around him. In any case, he knew nothing about this old man. Qin Jiaxing withdrew his gaze from the leaning mountain pavilion and shook his head. I don't know. In any case, I heard from some wandering cultivators that he has always been here. I don't know when he started. Yu Qianqiu looked at Fu Chen, but he also shook his head to show that he didn't know. On the other hand, Yan Lan frowned and said, this senior's identity is very mysterious. He never talks to anyone and doesn't easily hurt anyone. Therefore, there are rumors that he is deaf and mute. As for whether it's true or not, I don't know. Anyway, that's what everyone says. But what? Yu Qianqiu asked curiously. Yan Lan hesitated for a while and said, the Misty Rain Tower has made it clear that none of our disciples are allowed to cause trouble in Ghost Village. They are also not allowed to be rude to this old man. Otherwise, they will be severely punished. Oh. Yu Qianqiu was surprised and re-examined the one-armed old man. Yan Lan then asked softly, Mister, with your experience, you still don't know where he came from? F***ck. I don't have any experience at all. Yu Qianqiu stammered, N. Woo woo woo. Suddenly, the sound of a flute was heard and joined the flute. It sounded like a flute and a flute were playing together. Everyone looked towards the source of the sound. A person stood up next to the bonfire and blew the flute at the green-veiled woman in the mountain-leaning pavilion. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and was startled. It was the B*TCH who almost made him attack her earlier in the day. He didn't expect her to be acting cool here again. However, listening to the sound, he realized that the flute in this person's hand wasn't just for fun. He actually knew a bit about music and filled in the gaps in the woman's song. For a moment, it complemented each other and made the song even more pleasant to listen to. However, the four people next to the person seemed a bit disappointed. Good. It's so nice. They all clapped and cheered. Their flattery could drown an elephant. In the end, the flute in front of the mountain-leaning pavilion stopped playing. The woman had already put down the flute in her hand and seemed to be silently watching the scene below. The sound of the flute immediately became monotonous. Fong Ming also stopped playing and glared at the four people next to him. The four people immediately quieted down awkwardly. Fong Ming straightened his expression and walked out from the crowd. He walked towards the mountain-leaning pavilion and stopped at the foot of the hill. He cupped his hands together and said, "I am Fong Ming, a rogue cultivator. I suddenly heard the sounds of nature and couldn't help but play together with it. I hope you don't mind my rudeness." After he spoke politely, it seemed like the woman didn't want to talk to him anymore. The night wind blew against her green veil, but she didn't move an inch. Suddenly, a burst of laughter came from below. Someone whispered, "Look, another guy who wants to eat swan meat." Chapter 535. Roars of laughter rang out, and Yu Qianqiu shook his head with a bitter smile. Fong Ming's four companions couldn't take it anymore. They all stood up and looked around. "Who is it? Come out and speak if you have the guts." "So what if I said it?" Three people also stood up not far away. One of them sneered, "Is this ghost manor your family's territory? You don't even allow us to speak." Yu Qianqiu looked at the three people and found that they were all nascent soul cultivators. The one who spoke was even at the middle stage of nascent soul. These three people's cultivations were not low compared to rogue cultivators. When Fong Ming's four companions saw who it was, their expressions stiffened and they stood there awkwardly. It was obvious that they were afraid of the three people. Fu Chun smiled and softly said, "Boss, these three people are somewhat famous among the rogue cultivators. I heard that they are all at the nascent soul stage. The one who spoke is called Tian Yi." At the bottom of the hill, Fong Ming's expression changed. He slowly said to his companions, "Don't cause trouble in the ghost manor. All of you, sit down." Although these words were said to his own people, everyone could tell that it was a warning to the three people. Yu Qianqiu picked up the wine jar and drank a mouthful. He looked at Fong Ming and smiled. Aside from acting cool, this guy's adaptability was pretty good. He was much better than some of the disciples from the big sections. He knew that his side was no match for the other party, so he used the ghost manor to scold his own people. In reality, he was reminding the other three that the ghost manor was not a place where they could mess around. After being scolded, the four people sat down in embarrassment. Fong Ming turned around and put on a warm smile. He cupped his hands and said, "Miss, please don't take it to heart. They are all uncultured people. Please forgive them for disturbing your mood." Although he didn't criticize them by name, he basically put the label of uncultured on everyone's head. However, there weren't many people who knew how to be cultured. Even if they didn't know how to be cultured, it wasn't his turn to say it. "What right do you have to use everyone as a stepping stone to climb up the tree? Who do you think you are?" These words were indeed a little too broad. Even Yu Qianqiu frowned. However, Feng Yu was pure bullsh*t to him. He knew that he was constantly cursing and swearing. He had nothing to do with Fonya at all. His mentality was different now. If it was a more powerful guy who said that, he might jump out and fight back. But now, a small grasshopper would not be able to overturn the heavens. However, the majority of the people were not happy. They spat and cursed. Even the veiled woman on the hill slowly turned around with the intention of leaving. The one-armed old man stepped aside to make way. The middle-stage nascent soul cultivator, Tian Yi, pointed his finger and shouted, "Where did this madman come from? Holding a flute in your hand and blindly blowing it, you dare to pretend to be elegant and look down on the wandering cultivators of the world. If you have the ability, don't ever leave this ghost village." What he meant was, if you come out, I will take care of you. Fong Ming didn't take his threat to heart at all. Instead, the veiled woman was about to leave, and his eyes were filled with anxiety. He forced himself to calm down and laughed loudly, "Brother Tian. What you said is wrong. I once had the chance to meet Mr. Nongzhu of the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest. I saw that Mr. Nongzhu was unparalleled in elegance and was envious of him. That's why I followed his footsteps. Is he really that bad in your eyes? Mr. Nongzhu of the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest. The famous wandering cultivator who was also a middle-stage soul formation cultivator, Mr. Nongzhu." The crowd instantly fell silent. The veiled woman who had just turned around also paused and slowly turned around. She seemed to be sizing up Fong Ming. The one-armed old man also stared at Fong Ming with bright eyes. His words shocked everyone. Fong Ming wore a faint smile on his face as he looked around. However, there was an uncontrollable pride in his eyes. His four brothers were even more proud and arrogant. The wandering cultivator's gazes toward Fong Ming instantly turned into that of admiration. The legendary Mr. Nongzhu. To them, he was a person who was far above them. He was someone they could never reach. Not to mention reaching for it, not many people had even seen it before. "Ha! How does this guy know that old bastard Nongzhu?" Yu Qianqiu muttered softly. He pinched his chin and looked at Fong Ming thoughtfully. Although his voice was very soft, Yanlan still heard it. She looked at Yu Qianqiu with even more respect. This senior Nyo was indeed a master. It didn't sound like he was cursing. It seemed like he was very familiar with the legendary Mr. Nongzhu. Yu Qianqiu didn't know that his unintentional muttering had attracted the attention of a pair of bright eyes. However, the pair of eyes was blocked by the green veil, so no one could see it. At the same time, the one-armed old man in the Leaning Mountain Pavilion also glanced over. The rumor that he was deaf and mute was able to hear such a small murmur. "Ah." Tian Ye's imposing manners suddenly weakened. He didn't understand Fong Ming. He swallowed with difficulty and said, "Mr. Nongzhu is naturally elegant. I'm talking about you, not Mr. Nongzhu. But you can't just play a song and say that you know how to be elegant. You can laugh at us." As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately sat down. Obviously, he had no intention of arguing with Fong Ming. There was a bright moon in the sky. From time to time, dark clouds would block the moonlight, and then they would be blown away by the breeze. The bonfires below were crackling. While the crowd was still in shock, Yu Qianqiu calmly picked up a piece of dry wood and threw it into the bonfire. Watching the rising red flames, he sighed in his heart. He used to hang out with the upper-class people in the cultivation world every day. He didn't know how many times he had quarreled with Nongzhu and how many times he had argued with him. However, when he said the name Mr. Nongzhu, so many people didn't even dare to breathe heavily. It was really awesome. What he didn't know was that when he said the name Yu Qianqiu, it could also shock these rogue cultivators. What a joke. Yu Qianqiu had killed more than 2,000 cultivators from different countries, all of whom were above the original infant stage. He had become famous in the cultivation world. He was the butcher of the cultivation world. What was different from Nongju was that one was famous all over the world, and everyone was in awe of him. On the other hand, he was famous all over the world, and everyone was afraid of him. Two pairs of eyes on the hillside had been secretly watching his actions. Compared with the shocked expressions of the crowd, his indifferent look seemed a little out of place. Brother Tian, you're right. I really can't be compared with Mr. Nongju. I was rude. Fong Ming chuckled and blamed himself. But looking at him, he didn't seem to blame himself at all. He was obviously proud. Looking around, he saw that the veiled woman was also listening, so he said with great interest, "Of course, although I'm not elegant, I've been deeply influenced by Mr. Nongju's elegant demeanor since I met him. So I made up my mind to learn from famous songs everywhere. My hard work paid off, and finally, I got a few peerless masterpieces. I wonder if you're interested in listening to them." The elegant demeanor of Nongju. Why don't I know about it? What's the difference between that guy and a rascal? Elegant my ass. Yu Qianqiu's face twitched and he cursed in his heart. The crowd looked at each other and found that this place had become a place for him to perform. But they didn't know what relationship he had with Mr. Nongju, so they just stopped talking. Fong Ming's brothers naturally wouldn't let Fong Ming remain silent. They all cheered, "Of course we do. We're waiting to listen. I wonder what peerless masterpieces they are." Fong Ming laughed heartily and spoke to the crowd in a graceful manner. "Everyone is probably here for Yu Qianqiu, right? But you should know that although Yu Qianqiu is cruel and merciless, and is hunted by many countries, he's a peerless genius in music." Yu Qianqiu. Hearing this, everyone immediately whispered to each other. They really hadn't heard anything about Yu Qianqiu. You asked me, I asked you, but no one had heard of him. Yu Qianqiu slightly opened his mouth in astonishment. He thought to himself, "Why are you talking about me? Could it be that the peerless masterpieces he mentioned are?" He vaguely guessed something. The awkward atmosphere was stirred up in an instant. Everyone was quite interested in the topic of Yu Qianqiu. Not many people here know about these songs. I spent a lot of effort to get them from the Chinese cultivation world. Fong Ming suddenly shook his head and sighed. The song White Fox is heartbreaking. I really want all the heartless men in the world to listen to it. The song Mandarin Duck and Butterfly Dream makes people feel like they're in a gentle dream. It's as if the clouds are parted and the blue sky is revealed. When the song ends, people wake up, but the tear stains are still there. The song Laughing at the World of Mortals laughs at all the funny things in the world. The vicissitudes of life are like passing wind and clouds. All I want is to be free and unfettered in this life. When the veiled woman at the side of the pavilion heard these words, her shoulders seemed to subconsciously move. And Yu Qianqiu was even more dumbfounded. Wow! Why didn't I know that these three songs were so charming? This guy's eloquence was just too good. If he can't get a girl, then he's really heartless. I'll just bang my head against the wall and die. Everyone present was tempted by his words. They couldn't wait to ask him to hurry up and sing to see what kind of song could make him so melancholy. However, they wanted to continue listening to his next words, so they didn't disturb him. He sighed and said, Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu. What kind of person are you? Perhaps being unruly and ruthless is just your surface. Underneath that strong exterior of yours is a sentimental heart. The world is drunk, but you're the only sober one. You walk through the turbid world with cold eyes. Do you have a bosom friend? Sigh. I, Fong Ming, have been longing for you for a long time. It's a pity that I've only heard of you. You're a peerless genius. What a pity. Damn it. Is this stupid bird who acts cool my bosom friend? Why didn't I know I was so good? Yu Qianchou bit his lips and his face twitched. He was almost moved to tears by Fong Ming's words. He cursed in his heart, what the hell? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.